King of France. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51. Return to Parisian society. Despite a slight delay on the road, and Ning still arrived in Paris on time. Napoleon stayed in the dormitory of the Paris Military Academy this time and got off the train not long after arriving in Paris. And Ning went directly back to the house given to him by the Duke near the royal palace. Although the house had not been occupied for 5 years, it looked as if Ning had just left yesterday. There was not even dust on the table in the room. Maybe the Duke had someone clean it yesterday. And Ning settled down in Paris again, and that night he took a taxi to the monastery where the Brittany Club was located. When Fanny sent him to the car, she had a strange expression on her face, so Ning couldn't help but explain, "I'm going to see an old friend I haven't seen for many years, don't think too much. Fanny, even if you go to a brothel tonight, I won't say much. After all, Brienne has nothing, and that kind of place only has country girls smelling of hay. And Ning, I feel that your venomous tongue has improved after 5 years in Brienne. I'm just making a normal comment." Fanny paused. "So, have fun tonight. Just say I'm not going to that kind of place. I wish you and Mr. Danton a good time playing bridge." And Ning curled his lips and got on the carriage. The carriage passed through the streets of Paris at night. Brienne's streets were completely dark at night. The municipal government did not have the money to support the workers who lit the street lamps every night, and there were no street lamps in the city. When the Great Revolution came, the citizens of Brienne would have a headache about what to use to hang the nobles. But Paris has street lamps and lamplighters, and the roads at night are shrouded in grey light. And Ning arrived at the brightly lit monastery. Standing outside, he could hear the sound of bridge playing inside. And Ning walked in with ease. Danton, Mara and others happened to be sitting at a table near the door. When they heard the door open, they turned their heads to look. Danton put the cards on the table, stood up and opened his arms. "Look! Who's here?" Somehow, Danton's words reminded Ning of American bullying, or the CCTV translation dubbing version. And Ning sighed a little. He had been traveling through time for 5 years, but he could still remember the jokes before the time travel. He thought he was already an authentic resident of the 18th century. He shook his head, then shook the hand that Danton extended. "Good evening everyone, I'm back from Brienne. Mara, this sergeant's uniform fits you really well. From now on we will call you Sergeant. And Ning, I won't wear this suit for long, because I have already been enrolled in the military academy in Paris." Danton said in surprise, "A civilian, enrolled in the military academy? The people in the academy will surely be eager to challenge you to duels all day long." And Ning, "Then let them come. My individual combat performance in Brienne is the best in the whole grade. Even the fencing instructor was defeated by me." This is true. After 5 years of studying swordsmanship, and Ning's own skills plus the automatic defense and counterattack of the plugin have made him unbeatable. And Ning's friends laughed, and Marat said excitedly, "Then we'll wait for you to teach those nobles a lesson." Ning, "By the way, on the way back, I witnessed the farmers resisting taxes. Is His Majesty the King going to increase taxes again? Now we have only sent tax collectors to various places to collect this year's taxes, but it won't be long before the King will propose a bill to increase taxes." Danton replied, "You can't hear about these things in Brienne, right? You probably don't know that the King dismissed the capable finance minister Necker, apparently because he suggested that our deficit queen spend less money." Ning, "I guess it won't be long before the King has to find the banker back. After all, he is really short of money now." A long-faced gentleman interjected, "Even the genius who came up with the idea of borrowing money to maintain the Queen's expenses is powerless at this time." Ning, "Who is this?" Danton immediately introduced, "You don't know, this is our new friend, Camille Desmoulins, who is also a reporter. He has been writing articles in newspapers for many days to criticize His Majesty the King." "Camille, this is Andy Frost, the force of our small group." The long-faced gentleman nodded, "I guessed it, the aristocratic killer who is feared in Paris. I heard that you were going to use legal means to deal with the threat of the country Marcus at the beginning." "Yes." And Ning nodded, "I personally don't like fighting and killing." Everyone laughed, as if Ning told a very humorous joke. "Danton, you don't know? Ever since you went to Brienne, Mirabeau has been telling people the story of the day you threw your gloves in someone's face. You said you don't like to use knives and guns, Just like saying that the deficit queen doesn't like to waste money, no one will believe it. Damn, Mirabeau, the drunkard, what on earth did you do? Marat curled his lips. The deficit queen doesn't like to waste money? How is that possible? The Palace of Versailles is full of singing and dancing every night, and tens of thousands of livres can be spent in one night. I really don't understand why anyone would be willing to lend money to the king. In my opinion, the king's creditors should unite and force the king to pay back the money. Danton explained in Ning's ear, Marat is no longer a doctor. Now he specializes in writing things to criticize current social ills. He seems to think that this will make France a little better. And Ning shook his head, it's useless. France can't get better just by relying on these. There needs to be a big one. Marat shook his head, how can you say that? Although there is no direct effect, our continuous appeals will always be effective. The gentlemen of the Supreme Court also read our newspapers. It is said that the king himself reads it. As long as we... And Ning interrupted Marat, what if the king reads your newspapers? He is just a locksmith. You can't expect him to implement top-down reforms unless you replace his queen with Queen Teresa. Queen Teresa of Austria implemented many enlightened reforms and gave the Holy Roman Empire a big boost. Danton sighed, why is Teresa's daughter like this? And Ning, God knows. Maybe some things really can't be passed on, inherited. And Ning almost said the word heredity, remember that Mendel wasn't even born yet. Everyone shook their heads. Marat, let's play bridge. I won this time. Come on, give me the chips. And Ning, who's willing to give me a seat? I haven't played bridge for 5 years. Now I'm a nobody who can be bullied at will. Danton, take my seat. I'll be by your side to give you advice. Chapter 52 The curtain rises. The gentlemen in Paris played bridge and drank coffee while criticizing their king. Louis V never seemed to have thought about the bad consequences of letting the gentlemen talk about him like this, and he never thought about regulating the various speeches in Parisian society. Maybe he thought about it, but he was powerless because his finances had to rely on borrowing from Parisian bankers to survive. And those nobles who lent money to the royal family happened to be the driving force behind the prosperous publishing industry in Paris. For example, the Duke of Orleans supported people like Mirabeau and wrote a bunch of pornographic books about the Queen. In this situation, it is basically impossible to control speech in Paris. After arriving in Paris, Ning brought Napoleon into the social circle of Paris, and then he soon found that he had forgotten one thing. 5 years ago, when he was getting close to Napoleon, he blew the Republic of Corsica into a model of freedom known to all Parisians. However, in fact, most of the gentlemen in Paris didn't even know where Corsica was. Napoleon, who discovered this, had a tantrum with Ning, but fortunately, his position in Ning's heart finally overcame this small flaw. After accepting this, Napoleon began to tirelessly popularize science with people in Paris, saying that Corsica established a republic earlier than the British 13 colonies. But Napoleon's efforts stopped not long after. Because of the bad news from Corsica, Napoleon's father, Carlo Bonaparte, passed away. The main source of income for Napoleon's family was the salary of his father Carlo for managing the royal nursery in Corsica. Napoleon's brother Joseph Bonaparte was not a housekeeper. Although the salary of the priest was very generous, he could not take out much to subsidize the family. When Carlo died, the financial burden of the family fell on Joseph, but Napoleon suspected that his brother could not afford it at all. And Ning still had a small amount of money at this time. He still had the money he had paid for the task system, so he proposed to lend it to Napoleon so that he could finish his studies first. But Napoleon refused. He decided to stop all social activities from that day on, concentrate on studying, strive to graduate from the Paris Military Academy ahead of time, and go to the army to eat military pay. From then on, Napoleon disappeared from the social scene in Paris. Then Ning was teased that your little follower suddenly abandoned you. Ning didn't care. Napoleon began to study hard to graduate early. This was in line with history. There was nothing wrong with letting history follow its original direction. If history went astray, Ning would worry about not being able to sit on the fence. Ning's main thing in Paris was socializing. His plan has never changed, get to know as many big guys as possible and sit on the fucking fence. So Ning did his best to collect stamps everywhere. He had already collected stamps from several big guys of the Girondists. The rest was to expand his foundation in the Pei Yang faction. Unfortunately, most of the Pei Yang faction were nobles, and they were relatively traditional nobles. This group of people looked down on a leatherworker, so the progress of stamp collecting was greatly delayed. Only Lafayette, as a soldier, would occasionally chat with Ning. But Lafayette's goal was also very clear. This guy obviously wanted to use the title of founder of America to squeeze into the upper-class circle of Paris, and Ning was obviously not considered a member of the upper-class circle. In the end, Ning still felt comfortable with the Jacobins. These people were all civilians, without that kind of identity barrier, and they also regarded Ning as their own. In 1786, the Supreme Court of Paris repeatedly rejected Louis V's request for tax increase. The king once planned to send tax collectors to the local area to scrape the land, but the gentlemen of the Supreme Court sent people to recover it. The king's finances were getting more and more embarrassed, and it was said that the queen had begun to wear old clothes. Marat wrote a report, angrily criticizing the queen's extravagance and waste. The article also brought Robespierre, who was far away in Arras, saying that Robespierre had been wearing the same green coat for a whole university, while the queen had to wear a brand new skirt for every ball, which was simply too shameful. In May 1786, Napoleon got his rank of second lieutenant in advance. Ning gave him an officer's uniform as a gift. The officer's uniform issued by the school was too big for Napoleon, making him look like a walking coat rack. As a symbol of an officer, Napoleon received his own sword, but on the day of the sword, he said to Ning, "My sword belongs to me, only the belt belongs to France, and I will never swing the sword for France." Ning responded, "Of course, just follow your heart." Not long after the sword ceremony, Napoleon set off for Valence, where his regiment was stationed, and the 16-year-old second lieutenant would get his first batch of subordinates and the first cannon there. On the day of departure, Ning saw Napoleon out of the city, and then saw him walking on the road with a brisk pace. Because he refused Ning's loan, Napoleon decided to walk to his regiment to report. After seeing Napoleon off, Ning continued his studies. He got his diploma and the rank of second lieutenant a year later, and then became a mathematics teacher at the Paris Military Academy under the operation of the Duke of Orleans. This was Ning who personally asked the Duke for help. He didn't want to leave Paris to serve in the army in the countryside. That way, he would be far away from the center of the future storm, so how could he sit on the fence? On the day he got the military uniform, Christina, who was on duty in the palace, took a special leave and ran back. Together with Fanny, she held a small celebration for Ning. According to Christina, the Palace of Versailles had begun to save money. Some rooms had been abandoned. The royal tailors were constantly racking their brains to modify the queen's clothes to make them look like new clothes. It is said that the queen complained to Louis V every day, and His Majesty the King often locked himself in his tool room and fiddled with his locks. Later this year, the king re-employed a dismissed Necker, hoping that he would solve the financial problems with magic like last time. But this time, Necker had no choice. In 1788, a whole year of natural disasters came. Grain production decreased, bread prices soared, and complaints were heard everywhere. In the middle of this year, Ning received a long letter from Napoleon, in which Napoleon said excitedly, "The disaster has come. There are peasants who can't get enough food everywhere around my station, and the profiteers in the city are hoarding goods. The price of bread has risen to 30 sous. Is the great change you predicted coming soon?" And Ning wrote back to Napoleon, "Yes, in this case, if the king gathers the representatives of the civilians without knowing the consequences, everything will be like a convex lens facing the sun. All the heat will be concentrated on one point, it will be white hot and can't help but burn." At the end of 1788, Louis V, who could no longer hold back, officially ordered the selection of representatives to prepare to convene the three-level parliament in 1789, which had not been convened for 160 years. On the day when the news came out of the Palace of Versailles, Ning deliberately prepared a good meal for himself. He was ready, the stamp collection of his thighs was completed, and the fence-sitting performance was about to begin. First of all, his first task was to get himself elected to the three-level parliament. Without entering the three-level parliament, he can only be a bystander, rising and falling in the turbulent times, becoming a passerby. Even if he knows many big shots, as a commoner, he can't use these connections at all. Only by personally participating in the event can he truly be a cool fence-sitter. Chapter 53 It's a natural progression. As a history lover, Ning has always wanted to experience history, even if it is history from another time and space. To do this, he must obtain this seat so that he can sit in the National Assembly in the future and witness those famous scenes. To put it bluntly, Ning is still in the mentality of visiting a theme park. Everything he does now is to grab the ticket to this theme park called French Revolution. The representatives of the Third Estate are elected, that is indeed the case, but due to the limitations of the organizational capacity of this time and space, the voting rate in each constituency is actually shockingly low. So a more accurate statement is, the representatives of the Third Estate are elected by active elements in each region. A worker who is busy making a living all day long in a large-scale factory will definitely not have time to vote for his own representatives. In fact, those who can vote are those active elements who often appear in various gathering places, clubs, cafes and tennis courts. They are the main readers of newspapers that are now everywhere on the streets, and they are also the main readers of the large-scale printed pamphlets. Not only that, they are also the main readers of the little yellow books about the queens concocted by Mirabeau. So if you use your brain a little, you will know what kind of representatives these people will elect. The king actually wants these people to vote for the tax increase obediently, which is really a pipe dream. This morning, Ning got up very early. Today is the day for voting in the constituency where the Paris Military Academy is located. The nobles with titles will vote inside the military academy, and the representatives elected will represent the second class. The civilians will vote in George Square, outside the military academy, to elect people who can represent the third class. There is only one third-class seat in the constituency assigned to Ning, and Ning is determined to win it. For this reason, he specially changed into his most decent set of clothes, and then put on the wig issued by the school. This wig is the standard equipment for officers. Officers of this era have to dress themselves up like a rooster in full costume when going to the battlefield. Fanny looked at Ning puzzledly and asked, "Aren't you going to wear a military uniform?" Ning, "The military uniform will remind people of my identity as an officer, and they will think I'm a noble. Identity is very important at this time." Fanny, "If you want to emphasize your civilian identity, you shouldn't wear chaps and stockings." Ning shook her head, No, the voting time is in the morning. This is when the real trouser men are at work, you know? Bread is so expensive now, they have to transfer the bread money. Those who come to vote are gentlemen of the common people who hope to become as decent as the nobles. In other words, petty bourgeoisie, although this term had not yet been born at this time. Fanny, "Oh my God, I actually think what you said makes sense. Hey, I'm always reasonable, okay? Maybe, I haven't read many books, I don't understand the complicated things you said." Ning looked at Fanny suspiciously. He didn't quite believe that Fanny hadn't read much. Because Fanny could pick up all kinds of jokes, giving people the impression that she knew everything and could talk about anything. But Fanny herself kept saying, "These are all hearsay from the maid's gossip." Ning retracted his gaze, looked at himself in the dressing mirror, and then clapped his hands. "Okay, I'll go out like this, and when I come back victorious." Wait a minute. Fanny suddenly stopped Ning, who was about to go out, and helped him tidy up his clothes. This move, like that of a newlywed wife, hit in Ning's heart, and he felt that his favorability towards the little maid was increasing at a visible speed. "Fanny, okay, now your loss is not a matter of dressing. And Ning, you helped me tidy up my clothes just to say this." Fanny hurried Ning impatiently, "Okay, let's go. If you are late for your speech, no one will vote for you." Ning was pushed onto the street by Fanny. The hired carriage was waiting for him at the door. When Ning arrived at George Square, a large number of gentlemen had gathered in the square. Ning carefully observed their clothes. No one was wearing trousers, all of them were urban middle class. It seemed that all the lawyers, doctors, accountants, small businessmen and clerks in the city were gathered in the square. No one was giving a speech. Ning heard a loud voice asking, "Who are we going to elect? Whoever wants to run for election, stand up and speak." Ning looked at the loud voice and found that he was a man wearing trousers. Judging from his expression, he should be a street urchin. "Who are we going to elect?" The street urchin shouted again, "Stand up." Ning stood directly on the flower bed by the roadside and shouted at the top of his voice, "I am the candidate for this district." All eyes around were focused on Ning all of a sudden. "Wait a minute, why does this scene feel so much like everyone look at me? I'm going to announce something, I'm an idiot." In order to get rid of the embarrassment, Ning continued, "I'm Andy Frost, the son of a shoemaker, now a teacher at the French Military Academy. In fact, Ning has another identity. He now has the rank of lieutenant and is an officer who can lead orderly soldiers on the battlefield." But Ning deliberately concealed this and emphasized his identity as a teacher at the military academy. After introducing himself, Ning continued, "Many of you may not have heard of my name, but I have a nickname. You must know it very well. That's right, I'm the noble killer. I have killed 3 nobles in duels. 5 years ago, I threw my gloves in the face of a noble who despised me, and then started the road to duels. I used my sword to make him never dare to despise me again. Now, I come to elect representatives of the Third Estate to represent all of you, to go to the 3-level parliament, and throw gloves in the faces of the nobles. I want to say to these gentlemen who look down on us, screw you, the Third Estate is everything." SYNOPSIS pamphlet What is the Third Estate has been published. Just like in the history of another time and space, this pamphlet became the top trend in Paris as soon as it was published. Most Parisians, regardless of whether they can read or not, can recite the famous saying in it, "The Third Estate is everything." Ning just used this pamphlet in his speech. The result was just as Ning expected. The audience cheered together. "That's right. Everything. Go to the 3-level parliament and tell them. Tell His Majesty the King." At this time, Ning's opponent, a lawyer who was running for election in the same constituency, finally arrived. He also found a flower bed to stand on, pointing at Ning across the huge square. "Don't listen to him. He is the king's officer. As an officer, he must be loyal to the king. He even has a medal awarded to him by Louis V." And Ning was prepared for this. He took out the medal. "Are you talking about this?" The other party pointed at the medal and shouted as if he had found a treasure, "Yes. Look, this is the proof of his loyalty to the king. He is, what are you going to do?" And Ning swung his arm and threw the medal out. "Whoever wants this kind of thing can take it." I thought at first that if I got the medal, the nobles would treat us as equals, but did they? No, they didn't. Even if I got the medal given by the king, in their eyes I was still a commoner, a mud-legged peasant. Still an object of ridicule. It was because I saw through this that I threw the gloves in the face of the noble who looked down on me. Then I killed him in the duel fairly, justly, reasonably and legally. The crowd cheered again. And Ning noticed that the street urchins mixed in the crowd shouted the loudest. They liked this kind of simple and direct shouting. The lawyer wanted to say something, but the cheers of the crowd overwhelmed his words. Obviously, Mr. Lawyer's experience in street politics is seriously insufficient. At this time, the lawyer suddenly decided to fight back against Ning in Latin. "We shouldn't elect a warrior to go up, otherwise the nobles will laugh at us." As soon as Latin came out, the crowd that was still noisy suddenly quieted down. Obviously, even in the hearts of ordinary people, knowing Latin is indeed more noble. And Ning also refuted in Latin. "Who said I would be laughed at? Although I am only the son of a cobbler, I can still be proficient in Latin." The lawyer was stunned. Then Ning said in French, "I just told this lawyer friend that even the son of a cobbler can know Latin." Then Ning switched to Italian. "Not only Latin, I also know many other languages." He switched to German again. "I have learned these languages before I even entered the military academy." Even the nobles definitely don't have such outstanding learning abilities. The crowd cheered again, even though they didn't understand what Ning said at all. And Ning looked at the situation and felt that she should be safe. Chapter 54 The Birth of the People's Friend. Ning was having a great time with his opponent when the clerk in charge of voting shouted, "Okay, voting begins. Those who can write go this way, those who can't write go the other way." As soon as the clerk finished speaking, most people rushed to the entrance on the literacy side. Just as Ning predicted, most of the people who came to vote were literate petty bourgeoisie. Although the speech just now seemed to have a good effect, Ning did not relax. He got a table and stood next to the voting crowd, shouting, "Vote for me. I will give those nobles a good lesson. Vote for me. I am Andy Frost." The effect of this move was immediate, and some people who wanted to waver also wrote Andy Frost under this attack. As for the lawyer who was competing with Ning for this position, most of the onlookers didn't even know his name, let alone vote for him. The chaotic voting continued in this noisy way until the afternoon. When the real trousers men started to get off work that afternoon, the voting in the square had ended and the counting of votes began. That night, the preliminary voting results came out. And Ning took the results and happily went to the Brittany Club to report to everyone. As soon as he entered the club, he saw Marat sitting at the bridge table with a bitter face, playing solitaire alone in a depressed mood. And Ning asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" At this time, Danton came over and took Ning away, let him be alone for a while. And Ning looked puzzled. "What's going on? What else can it be? He went to elect a representative, but he lost." Danton said lightly. and Ning couldn't help but frown. To be honest, he couldn't remember whether Mara was elected as a representative when the three-level parliament was first convened. But even if Mara didn't get elected, it wouldn't be strange. There are many details that are different between this time and space and the original time and space. It is estimated that the general trend of the entire history is fixed, but the specific details are full of randomness and accidents. While Ning was thinking about this, Danton continued, Mara gave a passionate speech in his constituency, but in the end he was no match for the handsome face of his enemy. When Ning heard this, he thought that Saint Just, the archangel of revolution, had finally appeared. Mara was famous for his ugliness, and it would be terrible to be in the same constituency with Saint Just. After all, this angel of terror was unique in the history of the French Revolution. Others left their names in history for their civil and military achievements, but he left his name for his handsomeness. At this time, Mara said loudly, I can't admit it. Just because he has a handsome face, he defeated my carefully prepared speech. I can't accept it. At this time, Ning really wanted to go up and tell Mara that in the American presidential election hundreds of years later, a guy named Kennedy also relied on his handsome appearance to defeat his shrewd opponent. It's nothing, this is the era of looking at faces. Mara was still getting ready to complain, and that Mirabeau, you know, he didn't give a speech, but instead gave out free pornographic books he wrote about the Queen's love stories. I saw many people who couldn't spell his name, so they just copied the signature on the booklet. How can these people represent the people if they are elected? Danton shrugged, Mirabeau can at least represent all the drunkards in Paris. Whenever you see Mr. Mirabeau at night, his face must be rosy, and the smell of alcohol from his mouth can suffocate people. Then Danton changed the subject and looked at Ning. Andy, how is it over there? The nobles seem to have chosen the president of the Paris Military Academy as their representative. And Ning spread his hands, and the common people chose the son of a cobbler, a noble killer, a man who won 3 duels. Mara, they voted for you just because you are known as a noble killer. And Ning, Mara, the representation issue is already like this, it can't be changed. You might as well think about how to expand your influence in the future. This way you can put this reputation to good use the next time you elect a member of parliament. Mara frowned, what are you talking about? Next time. And Ning, yes, you don't think that we, the elected representatives, are just going to Versailles for sightseeing, right? Let me tell you, the king wants us to discuss how to increase taxes, but we don't want to discuss this. We don't want to care about the royal financial crisis at all. We went to Versailles to establish a constitutional monarchy. You think, since it's a constitutional monarchy, there will naturally be the next parliament, right? Marat snapped his fingers, you're right. I shouldn't be too obsessed with the result this time. I should pick up my pen and fight for the next election. Danton, that's right, this is more suitable for you than sitting here complaining about everything. Marat, I want to take action. I should start my own newspaper. I have some money saved when I was a doctor, and I can take it out temporarily. And Ning, you can also invite the Duke of Orleans to get involved. He likes to invest in progressive newspapers the most. It should be said that the Duke of Orleans likes any media that can discredit Louis V. The current Duke of Orleans is still dreaming of becoming Louis VI. He supports the Enlightenment, runs various publishing businesses, and opens his private territory, the Royal Palace, to ordinary people in Paris. These are all chess pieces for this purpose. It will take some time for him to become the famous Mr. Equality. Marat has completely gotten rid of the shadow of failure. He is enthusiastically planning for the future. I not only have to find investment, but also people who are willing to write articles. When I submit articles to other newspapers, they always suppress my articles and change them here and there. This time I will select the articles. I want to choose those that are the most direct, the most passionate and straightforward, and it would be best if those noble lords would be ashamed to death when they see them. Guys, what do you think this new newspaper should be called? Danton, I suggest calling it The Seine, which corresponds to the British Times. And Ning was shocked. Was there already a Times at this time? Was it unique to this time and space, or was it the same in the original history? Marat shook his head. No, how can it be called The Seine News? I don't know what the newspaper is about after reading the name. It has to be more clear-cut. I think it can be called the Seine Herald. And Ning couldn't help but frown. What the hell, Marat's newspaper, isn't it called the Friends of the People? He thought about it and decided to correct this small mistake, so he said, I think it's better to call it the Friends of the People. You see, it's simple and straightforward, and you can tell what the newspaper is about at a glance. Mara repeated the words Ning had just said, Friends of the People. My old friend, you are a language genius. This is good, concise and powerful. If everything goes well, my newspaper can even be published before the three-level parliament is officially convened. Just wait, I will definitely cheer for you in the newspaper. Danton, I thought you would monitor us to fulfill our representative duties. Of course, there will be monitoring. After all, you replaced me to attend this meeting. Of course, I will keep a close eye on your every move. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, The Decline of the King's Power. Ning was chatting with his friends when a tall man with a horse face suddenly came over and said to them, How are things today? Ning saw that the person who came was the current mayor of Paris, Bailly. This man's surname reminded Ning of Mr. Bailly in Avanti. But Mr. Bailly in Avanti was a fat man, while this man was tall, thin, and had a long face. Bailly was a core member of the Pei Yang faction later, but now he appeared in the Brittany Club. In fact, the clubs in the French Revolution era were very different from the parties in later generations. It was really just a club for everyone to chat and play bridge. The Pei Yang faction and even the royalists could play in the same room with the Jacobins. Dan spoke up. Marat was not elected because he was too ugly. He was planning to use his savings to start a special newspaper to supervise the work of those of us who were elected. What about you, Mr. Bailly? You must have been elected, right? Bailly was the mayor of Paris. The people who elected representatives were mainly arranged by the Paris municipal government. It would be difficult for him to fail to be elected. Bailly, of course I was elected, so that I can be in the parliament. Ning interrupted Bailly and asked a crucial question, which estate did you elect as a representative? Bailly, is there any need to ask? Of course, the third estate. You are noble. In this three-level parliament, many nobles who should have gone to the second estate also came to represent the third estate. These people were basically new nobles who had transformed into capitalists. Later, as the situation developed, many people from the first and second estates also joined the Constituent Assembly, which was mainly composed of the third estate. Bailly, I am just a small noble with an empty title of nobility. Not only did I elect a representative of the third estate, but the Marquis Lafayette was also elected as a representative of the third estate. I have a feeling that this time the third estate will not let your majesty get what he wants. Mara, just now Andy was already shouting that in this three-level parliament, everyone will work hard to turn France into a constitutional monarchy, like the United Kingdom. Is that so? A new person joined the conversation. Lafayette came to Bailly in a military uniform. The 32-year-old founder of America was already balding, and the wig could not cover his shiny forehead. Ning, Mr. Lafayette, don't you plan to promote the Constitution? I think everyone should think about starting the Constitution, except for the first-class clergy. Lafayette, don't exclude the clergy. In fact, many clergy also think that the system of all power belongs to the king is outdated. Are you referring to Mr. Talleyrand and Mr. Sieyès? Marat asked. Lafayette, not only them, but many people think so. Anyway, this parliament. While Lafayette was talking, Ning saw the club's waiter pushing a small cart covered with cloth towards the club's door. Ning was curious, so he said sorry, and then temporarily left his friends to see what the waiters were doing. He went out of the club's door and saw dozens of beggars gathered outside the club. No, not only beggars, but also many ordinary civilians mixed in with the beggars. The waiter was driving away a hunchbacked lady. Go away. These breads are for beggars. Are you a beggar? The lady burst into tears. Please, sir, we have children at home. Bread is too expensive, and we can't earn enough money even if we work hard. My family has been drinking wild vegetable soup for several days. If we don't eat some bread, we won't even have the strength to work. The waiter wanted to drive her away, but Ning stepped forward and said, give it to her. In my opinion, people who work hard are more admirable than those who lie down and wait for relief. The waiter showed an embarrassed expression. The abbot of the monastery asked us to only help beggars. Ning, open your eyes and look, The price of bread has risen to 50 sous each. Ordinary workers can't even earn half a loaf of bread after working for a day. The difference between them and beggars is that they are still working. If it weren't for a bad year, who would put down their self-esteem and beg? The waiter hesitated, then stuffed a piece of moldy bread into the woman's hand. The woman immediately devoured the bread voraciously, as if it was not a bread covered with mold, but some kind of delicacy. Ning, give her another piece and let her take it to the child. The waiter was defeated. The woman thanked him repeatedly with tears in her eyes. Thank you, kind sir. May God bless you. Ning complained in his heart that as a Chinese, I am probably not in charge. Then he stood at the door and watched the waiters distribute the bread equally to all the beggars and civilians who gathered in front of the monastery, and then returned to his friends with satisfaction. Dong, where have you been? Watching the waiters give alms. Ning briefly described the situation outside. Everyone fell silent. Suddenly Marat slammed the table hard. This is the title of my first article. The people are still starving, and our king is still thinking about raising taxes to buy skirts for his mistress. Lafayette reminded, Marie is the queen, not the mistress. In fact, if His Majesty Louis had a mistress, many people would be relieved. Ning, he has a mistress. Everyone looked at Ning in surprise. Lafayette frowned. I often go to court balls in recent years, but I haven't heard of it. Ning spread his hands, I mean those locks. Everyone laughed, and the air was filled with a happy atmosphere. After laughing, Lafayette said, in fact, it's not just locks. Our locksmith king is now fascinated by tinkering with execution devices. He has invented something that can quickly cut off other people's heads. Ning was shocked. What's going on? Was the guillotine in this world invented by Louis V himself? In the original time and space, Louis V personally improved the guillotine, which was already a black humor. Now the black humor is super doubled? Ning, so what does His Majesty the King intend to do? Use the device he invented to behead all those who oppose him. Marat said contemptuously, Humph, I don't think he has the courage to do so. Indeed, how could a locksmith have such courage? Everyone said a lot of mocking and contemptuous words about Louis V. In the era of Louis XIV, Ning and his gang would have been sent to the gallows long ago. But now is the era of Louis V, an era of declining royal power, and Louis V, the locksmith king and his deficit queen, have undoubtedly greatly accelerated the decline of royal power. The French no longer fear their king. Chapter 56 The storm is coming. Not long after the representative election, Ning received a letter from Napoleon from his base. The 19-year-old lieutenant asked in doubt in the letter, Andy, you always talk about the power of the people, so when the nearby district elected representatives, I went to see it, hoping to feel this power in person, but unfortunately I didn't feel it. I only saw a group of rabble gathered together. At first, only a few people shouted the names of the representatives, and the rest didn't seem to know who they were going to vote for. But soon everyone shouted that name together. In my opinion, this is simply blind obedience. The crowd is like the ducklings behind the mother duck, blindly watching the person in front of them move forward, shaking their long necks as they walk. What power can such people have? Rather than believing in the power of these people, I would rather believe in shrapnel, which can completely disintegrate them. This letter made Ning frown. Napoleon looked like a tyrant. Well, he was indeed. In the history of another time and space, Napoleon had used shrapnel to bombard the rebellious people as early as the beginning of the revolution. Later, he tried it again in Paris with outstanding results. Ning thought about it and wrote a long letter to Napoleon. I saw the same scene in Paris. I was even the one who shouted their names. Yes, they look like a group of rabble now, but that's because they haven't awakened yet. The reason why they are so excited now is only because of the high price of bread. They just vaguely feel that something must change. If they don't change, they will starve tomorrow. But as things progress, they will eventually understand that the time is coming when they will be equal to the nobles. One day they will shout freedom, equality and fraternity, and send those higher-ranking noble masters into the history books. Then you will see an invincible army that can face shrapnel and grape shot without changing its expression. Yes, the characteristics of the army in the early days of the French Reform were that the morale was very high and it was extremely difficult to collapse, but the training level was shockingly low. Ning didn't mind a little preview of this scene to Napoleon, so that when Napoleon saw that the National Guard was really like this in the future, he would definitely remember Ning's awesomeness. Ning's future was all about this title of Marshal. After all, and Ning asked himself and felt that he was not a good fighter. He might be a qualified artillery officer now, but he was just qualified. Moreover, since he got the rank, and Ning has not worked in the army for a day. He has been teaching at the Paris Military Academy. The subject he is responsible for is mathematics, which is related to artillery. How could a mathematics teacher fight in a war? After writing the letter, and Ning took a brown paper envelope and put the letter in it, then took a candle and dripped a few drops on the envelope, and then took his metal and pressed an imprint on the wax clay. That's right, and Ning now uses the medal awarded to him by Louis V as a seal. Fanny. And Ning called her maid, "Go and help me post a letter." Fanny appeared quickly, took the letter and looked at it, and asked, "Is it sent to that Corsican dwarf?" "Yes. He also wants to elect representatives." No, he always thinks that he is Corsican, not French, so he will not participate in the French representative election. Since he thinks so, he should refuse the personnel bureau and not register." "Okay, Fanny, everyone has to bend over backwards for a few dollars, and it's not shameful." Fanny curled her lips and left with a letter. And Ning stood up and looked at the street below through the window. Someone was speaking on the street again today. The king convened the three-level parliament to increase our taxes. As for us, say, screw it. He thinks that the priests and nobles are on his side. According to the voting rules of the three-level parliament, they will definitely pass the tax increase bill. Our answer to this is, no. Never. The third estate can vote, but it is definitely not the case that the entire third estate has only one vote. Our goal is to have one person, one vote according to the actual number of representatives. And Ning stretched his head to see if he knew the speaker today. But unfortunately, it was a stranger today. The three estates have been the focus of all newspapers in Paris recently. Countless newspapers are attacking the old system of the three estates. Each of the three estates has only one vote. In this way, as long as the king has the support of the nobles and clergy, even if the representatives of the third estate are fully opposed, the tax increase bill will pass. It's a pity that Louis V was too naive. He didn't realize that many of the clergy of the first estate and the nobles of the second estate have been deeply influenced by the Enlightenment and have already turned to the third estate. And Ning was thinking about this while listening to the speech of the gentleman below. Unfortunately, the gentleman's views seemed to still stay on striving for one person, one vote, and then preventing the king from passing the tax increase bill. So Ning leaned on the window and made a strong hissing sound. "Hush! Look who this is. Your ideas are so superficial. Are we satisfied with just stopping the king's attempt to increase taxes? No. We have higher demands. We want to fight for constitutional monarchy. We want a constitution." The person downstairs immediately retorted, "His Majesty the King will not agree. He will not allow us to pass the constitution." And Ning, why should he allow it? No, we representatives are not the king's subjects. The people demand a constitution. We have the right to formulate it. And let it pass. We must pass the constitution and let the spirit of freedom, equality and fraternity come to this country. Well said. Someone downstairs cheered for Ning loudly. And Ning thought she had won over a passerby, but it turned out to be Dandong. And Ning, what wind blew you here? Dandong took out a letter and waved it at Ning. And Ning, come up, I'll open the door for you. The maid was not at home, so Ning had to open the door herself. A moment later, Dandong entered Ning's study. He looked around and exclaimed, "Your little nest is well made." And Ning smiled and said, "Because my maid is very tasteful." "Dandong, I can tell. Your maid is pretty and full of intelligence. She looks more like a rich lady than those young ladies." And Ning, "That's because you didn't see her muscles. When she prepared the bath water for me, she could lift 2 large buckets of water from the first floor at a time. It was quite scary." "So what was that letter just now?" Danton threw the letter on Ning's desk. And Ning picked it up and saw that the postmark was from Paris. And Ning, Robespierre. Yes, he was also elected as a representative. When he wrote to us, he was about to come to Paris. And Ning nodded, "Well, I guessed it. In fact, it was not a guess, but I had read the guide in advance." "Danton, now we are gathered in Paris again. I was thinking, when Maximilien arrives in Paris, we should find a place to have a good meal." And Ning suddenly said, "I wonder if he is still wearing his green coat." Danton frowned. "It should not be the case. He is a judge and has a good salary." "That's right. Lawyers in this era could also serve as judges or prosecutors at the same time. After all, The later court trial system was still in its infancy, and there were no strict regulations. It was common for everyone to crosstalk with each other. Dun. By the way, do you know the lightning rod case? Ning, is it the case where a lightning rod was installed but was complained by neighbors? Yes, that's the one. Maximilian actually defended the family who installed the lightning rod. It's weird. That thing doesn't look reliable at first glance. Ning, no, as far as I know, it's quite reliable. When I was in my hometown, I witnessed lightning strike the wind vane on the roof with my own eyes, and more than once. I think there must be some scientific principle behind this. Replacing the wind vane with a lightning rod can also reproduce this process. Dun raised his eyebrows. Really? Well, Maximilian did win the case, but I would never install that kind of iron needle on my roof. Don't you think it looks like a nail pointing to the sky on the roof? What if one day God pricks his foot while taking a walk? Ning laughed. Danton changed the subject. Andy, are you really going to propose the formulation of a constitution at a meeting? Ning, even if I don't mention it, someone else will, such as Mr. Sias. He declared that the Third Estate is everything. Do you think His Majesty will agree? Ning, he won't, he definitely won't. No one will willingly be deprived of their rights. But what does that matter? Many things are not subject to the will of the locksmith. Danton looked at Ning. My God, you are the most determined and radical among us. Wait a minute. I'm not. I'm going to sit on the fence. Shit, because I've read the script, I can't help but speak in this conclusive tone. I really just read the script and said it subconsciously. I'm going to sit on the fence. While Ning was reflecting on what he had done, Dun stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the blood-red setting sun outside. You know, Andy, I always feel that something big is coming, very, very big. I can feel it. I don't know what it is, but it's coming this way. Ning, me too. The storm is coming. Chapter 57, A Fiery Beginning. In the next half-month, representatives from all over France arrived in Paris one after another. However, the traffic of this era is in a very delicate state. If you travel day and night and constantly change horses at the post station, it will not take more than a few days to get to Paris from the farthest corner of France. But the problem lies here. Not every representative is in such a hurry. Especially some old nobles, they have to spend a lot of time to prepare their clothes to come to Paris. Considering the situation of these representatives, the convening time of the three-level parliament was set for 3 months later. Ning observed for a few days and found that this was a fatal mistake for the King of France, because he gave the representatives of the third level time to connect with each other. The Brittany Club has been crowded these days, and the people you see every day are different. The representatives of the third level are wandering between various clubs and exchanging opinions fiercely. Ning met the representative figures of the Royalists, the Pei-Yang faction, and the Girondists in the headquarters of the future Jacobin Club, but at this time they did not have such huge differences as later, and they were still happily discussing the future of France. Ning himself went to the future Girondists' territory to get close to them, and then he saw Mably's nephew there. This young man inherited Mably's legacy and promoted the embryonic form of the Communist Party in the club. At this time, Paris was a melting pot. All thoughts about the future of France were gathered here. People enthusiastically debated where France should be taken. Then Ning found that no one had thought of the future path that the trousers would force France to take. At this time, almost everyone, regardless of their views and doctrines, believed that the future of France would move towards constitutional monarchy. In other words, for France at this time, revolution was also an unimagined path. As a paradox game player, Ning's restless soul was ready to move again. If he could click on the national policy at this time, he would definitely click on the button called unimagined path. Unfortunately, Ning did not have such a powerful system. His system could only make him a super soldier on the battlefield and act as a translator konjac, a famous prop of Doraemon. One day in April, Ning was reading the morning newspaper bought by Fanny at home. Well, not all morning newspapers, but also yesterday's evening newspaper. Anyway, Fanny would buy all the newspapers that Ning didn't have in his study every morning, using Ning's officer's allowance. Suddenly, Marat's voice came from outside the house. Andy. It's bad. Something big happened. Andy stood up in confusion, opened the window and looked out. What happened? Marat, didn't you say that hungry people are like a big gunpowder barrel? It exploded. Ning was shocked. What? I didn't hear the sound of artillery. He thought the capture of the Bastille happened in advance. However, the Bastille is a fortress after all, and it is difficult to capture it without artillery. Marat was confused by Ning's reaction. What artillery sound? What are you talking about? And Ning, oh, so the Bastille is still fine. What are you talking about? Marat frowned, and his already ugly face became even uglier. It is indeed the Bastille. And Ning was shocked. Really? The prison was captured. I still want to punch in. Give me my punch card back. No, there was a riot in the suburb of Saint Antoine next to the prison. And Ning, huh? What the hell? But after knowing that it was not the fall of the Bastille, and Ning was slightly relieved. Marat continued, I don't know the details. It seems that the boss of a wallpaper factory refused to give the workers a pay raise, and then the workers. And Ning remembered that this boss was also a celebrity. He had a famous saying, no worker is worth 15 sous. Now 15 sous can't even buy half a baguette. This boss is also looking for death. At this time, he is tough with the workers. The result is that he can only choose a street lamp style he likes. Today should be just a prelude. After the news spreads, more angry workers attacked the boss's residence and looted everything he owns. And Ning immediately decided to dress up and go to the scene to watch the excitement. This is the prelude to the French Revolution. How can I not punch a card? And Ning had forgotten about this. After all, it had been 9 years since he traveled through time. It was a long time. Otherwise, he would have definitely checked in from the very beginning to witness the whole process. And Ning's current mentality was completely that of a visitor to a theme park. With the help of the plugin, it was difficult for him to die. So as a history enthusiast and a paradox player, he would definitely check in for this kind of thing. Marat was still urging him outside, hurry up. We have to rush to the scene to report as soon as possible. This matter is destined to be the front page of my newspaper. And Ning was getting dressed when Fanny came in with 2 formal coats. Are you going to wear a military uniform or casual clothes? And Ning thought about it and felt that it was not good for him to wear a military uniform to show off in such a dangerous situation. It would be easy to become a target of concentrated fire. And Ning, casual clothes, thank you. Fanny immediately hung the military uniform on the clothes rack next to her and began to help, and Ning put on casual clothes. 10 minutes later, and Ning came downstairs dressed neatly. Marat had already hired a carriage. Hurry up. Let's go. And Ning got into the carriage and sat opposite Marat. Marat immediately knocked on the front window of the carriage and told the coachman to hurry up. The carriage started, and Ning looked out the window and saw Fanny standing by the roadside watching him leave. Marat, the maid the Duke gave you is really well behaved. She even watched you leave. And Ning, so how did you know that something happened in the Saint Antoine district? You don't live there, do you? Of course, the security there is a little bit worse. Marat shook his ugly head that looked like a certain boss. I have my own news channel. Guess what it is? And Ning, I guess it's the newspaper boy who sells newspapers. Marat was shocked. How did you know? And Ning, it's very simple logical reasoning. You are a reporter now. You need first-hand news from all over the place. No one is more familiar with everything in the city than the newspaper boy walking around the streets. You just need to tell the children that you can get 5 copper coins for bringing the latest first-hand news, and they will continue to bring you the latest news. And Ning showed a proud expression after he finished speaking, as if all the insights just now came from his brain, but in fact, it was not. He just used Sherlock Holmes's words. In Sherlock Holmes stories, he often used newspaper boys and other younger children on the street to collect intelligence. Later, this became the iconic practice of British detectives. Almost every great detective created by British writers uses this trick. It is said that this routine indirectly inspired Gosho Aoyama to draw Detective Conan, a story with children around the detective as the protagonist. Marat looked at Ning in surprise. Absolutely right. My God, you are smarter than I thought. You are worthy of being a genius who learned almost all the languages of Europe after a trip to Brienne. Yes, now Ning tells his friends that his Italian, Spanish and Latin were all taught by a priest at the Brienne Military Academy. And Ning has a hunch that he feels that the Brienne Military Academy will sooner or later become as omnipotent as Hawaii and Conan in his story. In the future, when Ning shows any new skills that shock everyone, he can say I learned it at the Brienne Military Academy. While Ning and Marat were chatting, the carriage was speeding on the streets of Paris. Suddenly, the coachman shouted, "Whoa! and Ning looked out the window in confusion, and saw a team of Paris police driving along the street. Marat was also looking outside. The police are out. Damn, why are they out so quickly? And Ning, maybe it's because the three-level parliament is about to be convened, and the nerves of the Paris police are on edge. At this time, a policeman came over and said to the coachman of the carriage, "Coachman, tell the gentleman inside that the Saint Antoine district is not suitable for an outing today." Marat opened the door and got out of the car. "No. I want to go to the Saint Antoine district. You closing the road now means we are going to the right place." And Ning also jumped out of the car and showed his officer badge to the police. When he was not wearing a military uniform, he used this badge to prove his military identity. "And Ning, don't worry, I'm with this gentleman, his safety will be fine." The police looked at each other, and the policeman who spoke first shook his head and said, "We haven't received any news about the army's dispatch. And Ning, I came here as a personal friend. You may not know him. He is the reporter Mara from Friends of the People." "Mara, I'm the editor-in-chief." "Editor-in-chief. And Ning, oh, okay, editor-in-chief." The police thought for a moment and waved his hand. "Okay, you go. Anyway, it's none of my business if he dies." Mara threw down a thank you and ran past the reporters to the center of the commotion, followed by Ning. Turning a corner, Ning saw a familiar object hanging on the street lamp. "Wait a minute, I was kidding when I said I would choose a street lamp style I like." Ning opened his mouth and looked at the thing floating in the wind. "No, I don't remember this. Is this also a detail difference between the two time and space?" At this time, Ning heard the sound of horse hoofs. He turned his head and saw a small group of cuirassiers appear at the end of the road. The cavalry formed a horizontal column and rushed along the street like a huge wave towards the workers who were still moving things out of the workshop. Ning grabbed Marat, who wanted to continue to approach the scene, and dragged him into the gap between the buildings next to him. The two squeezed together and looked outside. The cavalry rumbled over and crashed into the unprepared crowd with the force of thunder. Ning saw an unlucky guy being stabbed through the heart by a spear. The knight threw away the spear and drew his saber. The workers who were still fanatically shouting "Hang him" just now fled in all directions, and screams were everywhere. The French Revolution in this time and space began with a cavalry charge. The bloody hooves of the cavalry were imprinted on the scroll of history, leaving a bold and colorful mark. Chapter 58. Why not eat cake? Marat was very emotional. How could they do this? These people just couldn't make ends meet, so they resorted to this desperate measure. Ning, maybe the master who commanded the cavalry didn't treat civilians as human beings at all. At this time, Marat saw the commander of the cuirassiers riding on a tall horse. He rushed out before Ning could react and blocked the master's horse. "Sir, I protest. You can't treat unarmed people like this." The master frowned directly because of Marat's appearance. He shouted, "Who are you? What's wrong with me suppressing the riotous hooligans? Look at what they did. What's wrong with the poor factory owner?" Marat shouted without flinching, "I am sure that he didn't pay wages, which caused this incident." The master snorted, "Not paying wages can send the boss to the lamppost? Is there any law? As for you, if you dare to talk nonsense again, I will throw you under the iron hoof of the cavalry and crush you. You are just a bunch of garbage at the bottom, so you die." Marat was about to continue to rage, and Ning directly pulled him back. "Marat is not dead yet. If he dies now, who will the royalist saint kill in the future?" "Oh no, that's wrong. Charlotte Corday was regarded as a saint by the royalists because she killed Marat. Ironically, Charlotte herself was a Republican. Just because she killed Marat, she was regarded as a saint by the royalist old nobles and diehards." Ning dragged Marat to a small alley. Marat was still very emotional. "This is a murder. I will criticize the cavalry officer just now and the Friends of the People. Wait and see, I will make his atrocities known to everyone." Ning, "Of course you can do this, but if I didn't pull you back just now, I'm afraid the Friends of the People would have no editor-in-chief." Marat thought about it and nodded. He seemed to be a little calmer. "You are right, my battlefield is not here, but in the field of public opinion. I will severely criticize this action and shout loudly." The result of this watching the excitement was that Marat wrote an impassioned long article in the newspaper the next day, portraying the rebellious workers as progressive people who demanded reform and describing the cavalry commander who suppressed them as unforgivable. But now there are all kinds of voices in Paris. In the newspapers published on the same day, there are also reports that the workers were portrayed as robbers who broke into the boss's house and killed the boss. For a time, the whole of Paris was in an uproar because of this incident, and almost everyone was discussing this matter. But with this incident, the workers found that the factory owners were obviously much easier to talk to. This incident was eventually called the Réveillon incident by the people of Paris. On April 29, the Paris police took several people who were said to be the leaders of the incident to the place Louis XV, preparing to publicly beat with a stick. Ning arrived at the square early that morning. In addition to him, there were many people who came from all over Paris. The place Louis XV was later called the Place de la Concorde. Geographically speaking, this is the center of Paris. The execution began at 1 p.m. At this time, a large number of people had gathered in the square. As the executioner's stick hit the back of the prisoner, a roar resounded throughout the square. The prisoner, long live the Third Estate! Ning opened his mouth wide. The prisoner did not look like a gentleman who would go in and out of the club. It seemed that the idea that the Third Estate was everything had spread widely among ordinary people, not just among respectable gentlemen. The sans-culottes had realized that they should stand up and fight for their rights. As the execution progressed, the prisoner's voice became weaker and weaker. His back had been beaten and swollen, and many places were torn. However, his voice was even more shocking because it gradually became weaker and weaker. Even after being beaten like this, he still continued to shout, "Long live the third class!" Finally, someone in the crowd followed him in shouting, "Long live the Third Estate!" Now, the whole square was like a burning hay, and the crowd shouted like a tidal wave, "Long live the Third Estate! The Third Estate is everything! The Third Estate will get everything!" Ning was at the center of the vortex, and was infected by the scene, and he also shouted, "Everything!" After returning from the place Louis XV, Ning sat at the table for a long time and couldn't calm down. He said to Fanny, who came in and asked him to have dinner, "Do you know? This city is now like a volcano before an eruption. There is power under the calm surface. I felt this power in the square today." Fanny looked uninterested. "I don't know what power is, I just know it's time to eat. You should go to the Duke's mansion for dinner today. The master, the young lady, and several young masters are waiting for you." Ning, "Mrs. Back." "Yes, I just came back from the Palace of Versailles today. I heard that the Queen approved her a few days of vacation. Christina has been promoted to captain in the Royal Guard Regiment and leads the entire Queen's Guard of Honor." In her letter to Ning, Christina described this Guard of Honor, each of whom is a great beauty who can dominate a party. Ning really wants to see the Queen's Guard composed of beauties. When the three-level parliament convenes, Ning will also go to the Palace of Versailles, and she should have a chance to see it. "Fanny, the lady came to see you this morning, but you went to watch the execution." Ning, "I didn't go to watch the execution, I went to observe the people's situation." "Don't talk like I'm an idle person running around with nothing to do. Aren't you?" Fanny asked back. Recently, Fanny no longer uses honorifics to talk to Ning. Only when she wants to ridicule Ning will she use honorifics solemnly. Ning couldn't refute Fanny's ridicule. After all, in the eyes of outsiders, Ning was just wandering around idly. He stood up. Let's go to eat." In the dining room of the main building of the royal palace, Ning met Christina in a captain's uniform. This military uniform is different from the men's uniform. It looks like, yes, like the small skirt that Napoleon's sister Paulina wore in the game paragraph of the Holy Maidens. Christina looked very heroic in this outfit on the boat, but it was a pity that this outfit covered her proud chest muscles to a certain extent. When Christina saw Ning, she came up to him with great joy and gave him a hug. "Andy, I miss you so much. I tell you, I have been talking about your bravery over and over again in the army, and now the Queen's Guards have all become your little fans." Ning smiled and said, "That's great. When the three-level parliament convenes, I will also go to the Palace of Versailles. Maybe I can look forward to a romantic encounter." Christina laughed and said, "Did you choose this representative for a romantic encounter? You are really something." No, I chose this representative to punch in and sit on the fence." At this time Christina said again, "By the way, the Queen recently heard about the Réveillon riots at the salon. I told her that the people were rioting because they were hungry and bread was too expensive. Guess how the Queen answered me?" Ning thought, is it coming? In another time and space, Queen Marie did not actually say the famous sentence, "Since there is no bread, why not eat cake?" It was made up by someone in the Parisian public opinion field at the time to oppose the Queen. This time and space looks. "Christina, the Queen told me that I already know that bread is expensive. Since they can't afford bread, why don't these people eat cake? Here it comes. The queen of this time and space is a real idiot. There is one more update, which will be updated at about 11:59. Nucleic acid can't stop me from updating twice a day. Chapter 59 Volcano. Christina interpreted Ning's speechless expression as being shocked by the queen's speech. She said worriedly, I have been trying to make the queen understand what kind of state the people are in, but she seems unable to understand. And Ning, of course she can't understand. She was born in the most prominent royal family in Europe, and then married into another prominent royal family in Europe. Her cognition has been limited by her origin. She is not like you. You have come into contact with many civilians in the royal palace. You know what the lives of civilians are like. You even went to the battlefield. Your knowledge is far beyond that Austrian woman. Christina, but the queen is prettier than me. She is obviously much older than me, but she looks so young. And Ning, the Habsburg skin is really good. And Ning once participated in the royal ball and met Queen Marie at the ball. It can only be said that Louis V was still impotent in front of Marie's gorgeous face. The locksmith is really not good. Of course, it may also be that the queen's body odor is too strong to make the locksmith lose interest, right? Christina was worried. You went to place Louis XV today, right? How was it? How was it? And Ning, very good. Paris was like a volcano that had accumulated to its limit. Of course, it was very good for Ning. What he was worried about was that the revolution would not happen. If it did not happen, he would have been famous in vain. Christina looked at Ning. What do you mean by very good? Excellent in what aspect? Ning, excellent in all aspects. He didn't want Christina to continue asking, so he changed the subject. You have been promoted to captain. The captain's uniform is so beautiful. Christina, oh, this is a new suit specially designed by the queen's tailor. The queen told him that it needs to have the bravery of a soldier and the charm of a girl, and then he succeeded. Then Christina sighed. This new uniform of mine cost a lot of money. The expenses of the palace are already so tight, and Her Royal Highness the Queen is wasting money like this. And Ning, she is the queen of deficit. How can we expect her not to waste money? Christina, Her Majesty the Queen has been in a good mood recently. She seems to think that once the three-level parliament convenes, she can smoothly increase taxes and have more money to spend. She has no idea what public opinion in Paris is saying, nor does she know what the gentlemen of the third level are planning. And Ning, does she really not know what public opinion is saying? Did anyone tell her at the ball and the salon? Christina, I think so, but the queen is very stubborn. She only listens to what she likes and ignores the rest. And Ning was speechless. It was Louis V's bad luck to have such a queen. Apart from her good looks, she was almost useless. At this time, the Duke of Orleans entered the restaurant. When he saw the state of Ning and Christina, he joked, should I leave first and come in after you finish your whisper? And Ning realized that he had not let go of Christina after hugging her just now. He kept his arms around the girl and chatted with her all the way. He quickly let go. Because Christina had already joined the army, she could not be used for aristocratic marriage in theory. In the aristocratic society of this time and space, daughters joining the army and daughters being sent to a monastery were both considered to be removed from the list of candidates for marriage. But soldiers could still get married. Generally, these women who joined the army would eventually become the wives of some officers. And Ning happened to be an officer. So the Duke himself probably had some thoughts in that regard. Christina turned around to greet her father, and Ning quickly saluted the Duke. The Duke, I heard from Christina that you were at the place Louis XV this afternoon? How was it? And Ning, the execution turned into a swearing-in ceremony of the Third Estate. Led by the person being executed, everyone shouted long live the Third Estate. The Duke nodded, to be honest, I regret it this time. I should have gone to the Third Estate to elect representatives instead of being elected as a noble. I heard that Mirabeau has done so. And Ning smiled and said, although Mirabeau has the title of Count, no one will regard this drunkard as a Count. In fact, Mirabeau has gone bankrupt as a noble. The little noble allowance given by the Personnel Bureau can't support his current expenses. Mirabeau's life in Paris is almost entirely maintained by writing articles for the Duke of Orleans in front of him and acting as a public opinion tool. He can be regarded as a worker, and there is no problem for him to run for the Third Estate. The Duke added, the general petition of the Second Estate has been almost completed. We have reached a consensus on the formulation of the Constitution, But the motion proposed by Marcus Lafayette and I to reform the voting method of the three-level parliament was rejected by everyone. The general petition still requires one vote for each of the three estates in the way it was 175 years ago. And Ning knew this would happen because he had predicted the future. But he was still unusually surprised. What? In this way, two estates do not support voting by number. The Duke shook his head. I have observed that the nobles in Paris basically support one person one vote for representatives, but the second estate has nearly 200 small nobles from the countryside, and they basically demand to maintain tradition, and we can't win over them. It's ironic that they used one person one vote to overturn the motion, supporting one person one vote for the entire parliament. And Ning thought that was normal. The small country nobles were poor and reactionary. They would be the core force of the future royalist rebellion. Now it's just that their reactionary characteristics were revealed for the first time. The Duke, I heard that the general petition of the First Estate has also been prepared. The priests basically support the formulation of a constitution to limit the royal power. It seems that we have reached a consensus with the priests on the issue of formulating a constitution. What's the current situation of the general petition of the Third Estate? Ending, it's still under discussion. After all, there are more than 500 representatives of the Third Estate. It is not easy to reach a consensus, and some representatives have not arrived in Paris yet. The Duke was shocked. They haven't arrived in Paris yet. Yes, maybe something has delayed them. The Duke curled his lips, and at this time the butler came in to report, "Dinner is ready, sir. It would be bad if it gets cold." The Duke waved his hand. "Okay, let's eat and talk while we eat." A few days later, on this afternoon, Ning was discussing the general petition of the representatives of the Third Estate with everyone at the Breton Club, when suddenly the door of the club was opened. A man in an old green coat entered the club. Danton laughed as soon as he saw the man. Damn, he's still wearing his green coat. Maximilien Robespierre finally ended the case that had been delayed for a long time in his hometown and rushed to Paris. Damn, failed to push the line, just 4 minutes late. I should have watched RNG's game earlier. I'm taking the nucleic acid test and watching the game today. It's too late. Chapter 60. The Level 3 conference begins. Ning raised her hand and said, "This way." Maximilien, "This way." Robespierre looked over immediately and smiled slightly. This was the serious Robespierre, and his smile was equivalent to laughing. He kept smiling as he came in front of Ning and the others. Danton walked up to him, patted his shoulder and asked, "When I saw you on the list of representatives, I was wondering when you would come to Paris." Ning, "I'm different. When I saw you on the list of representatives, I was wondering if you had changed your beloved green coat." Robespierre said seriously, "Although my financial situation has improved a bit recently, it's not to the extent that I can waste money casually." Danton, Maximilien, Andy is being humorous. Andy, you too. Maximilien will definitely not respond to your humor. Robespierre was a little surprised. Is this a joke? Well, I don't quite understand this. I thought you were talking about my green coat. So, what's the situation in Paris now? Ning, the current situation in Paris can be summarized as, "Long live the Third Estate." Robespierre hesitated, then asked Danton, "Is this also a joke?" Danton, "No, it's true. Not long ago, the municipal authorities whipped several Parisians in the Place Louis XV, so they shouted 'Long live the Third Estate' while being whipped. Now Paris has become an ignited volcano. Everyone in the Third Estate knows what is written in that pamphlet. The Third Estate is everything." Robespierre nodded. "Very good, this way we will get thorough public support. What are you discussing now?" Ning picked up the memorandum on the table and handed it to Robespierre. "Take a look. We are discussing the general petition of the Third Estate, and it will be submitted to the king tomorrow." Robespierre said loudly, "Is there still room for discussion? Our goal is of course to formulate a constitution, abolish all feudal privileges, and achieve equality for all. I have been helping ordinary people to fight lawsuits over the years, and I have seen too much oppression. The era when the nobles ride on the heads of the Third Estate should end." Ning, Maximilien, you have said most of the contents of the general petition we are currently proposing. Danton, that's what we proposed. Many great nobles also supported us. Marcus Lafayette and Duke Tolstoy also proposed this at the meeting of the Second Estate, but it was rejected by those backward and dirty little nobles. While speaking, Robespierre was reading the memorandum attentively. Suddenly he shouted, "Wait a minute. What's the matter with this one? It requires voting by head? So doesn't the current Estates General vote by head? Yes and no. Everything is based on the Estates General 175 years ago, one class, one vote. And Ning shrugged. Why, do you think? I thought it must be one person, one vote. Because isn't this the case in all the occasions that have mentioned voting recently? How can it be so backward? This system must be reformed, and heads must be counted. Otherwise, everything will be out of the question, and the nobles and clergy will still ride on the heads of the Third Estate. And Ning, I think this may be the most important topic at the beginning of the Estates General. Robespierre looked a little angry. Ridiculous. We have to start from such a basic place. Are we really the home of the Enlightenment? Danton, hello. As far as I know, yes. That night, Ning talked a lot with Robespierre, whom she had not seen for a long time. Later, Marat, who had finished writing today's battle manifesto, also joined the conversation and criticized the aristocracy. That night, Ning slept well. The next day, the general petition of the Third Estate was finally submitted to the king. A few days later, the three-level conference was finally convened again after 175 years. Early in the morning of this day, Ning rushed to the Palace of Versailles. The main venue of the three-level parliament was in this luxurious palace. Ning remembered that before she traveled through time, she had read an article on a public account saying that the Palace of Versailles was full of human feces and it was smelly. In fact, if you think about it logically, you will know that this is absolutely impossible. Would your king live in a pile of feces? Even if there is no sound sewer system, manpower can be used to clean it. He must have sent servants to dig 3 feet into the ground to find the pile of rice and deal with it as soon as he smelled the smell. Anyway, the Palace of Versailles that Ning saw was in line with the later generation's imagination of the life of the powerful and aristocratic class. This palace was quiet, unique, comfortable and pleasant. But today, the Palace of Versailles must be described as crowded. 1,000 representatives attending the Estates General gathered here early in the morning, and in addition, there were a large number of sans-culottes who came from downtown Paris to watch. Yes, the Estates General can be watched by onlookers. When the meeting is held, there will be spectator seats like stands next to it, and ordinary people can also stand there to watch the representatives discuss. Ning didn't know which genius came up with this practice of allowing onlookers. Ning observed the people pouring into the Palace of Versailles and found that most of them were well-dressed petty bourgeoisie, and the remaining small part were idle street urchins. The real sans-culottes were working hard in Paris at this moment, trying to buy a piece of bread that was getting more and more expensive. Ning was observing the crowd of onlookers, and a solemn voice announced loudly, "The Estates General has officially begun. Please enter the venue, representatives." The speaker was the French king's chief court steward, I forgot his name, Ning. The delegates began to line up and enter from the main entrance, while the onlookers poured into the stands of the house from the side passage. Ning showed his delegate card to the royal guard who was checking, and then followed the crowd into the venue. He was very excited, and as a history enthusiast, he couldn't help being excited. He almost forgot that he joined the Estates General just to get familiar with others and have fun sitting on the fence. The hall where the Estates General was held was magnificent, with portraits of Louis XV and Louis XIV hanging on the walls. The former kings in the portraits were wearing cloaks covered with the iris symbol representing the Bourbon dynasty. Compared with the majesty of the former kings, Louis XV standing in front of the portrait looked like a toy tin soldier in full dress. The locksmith seemed to be in a bad mood and frowned. Next to him was the Austrian princess, Marie, the Queen of France. Today Marie wore a white dress and was as radiant as ever. After seeing this, Danton teased Ning in her ear, "Her Majesty the Queen looks very happy. She probably thinks that she can raise taxes today so that she can have money to squander, right?" Ning sneered, "She won't get her wish." At this time, Ning suddenly found that the guard standing behind the Queen looked a little familiar. "Wait a minute, is that Christina? Good man, you are involved in this matter in this way? Can it be such a coincidence? Sure enough, you are the heroine of my story, right?" Christina also saw Ning and smiled sweetly. At this time, all the representatives had taken their seats. On Ning's left was Danton, and on his right was Robespierre. From this seat, it is very unfavorable for his future fence-sitting career. Ning thought silently, when the National Assembly convenes, I must sit in the middle of the two factions. At this time, the ceremonial officer announced loudly, "Everyone, please be quiet." Next, We invite His Majesty the King of France to give an opening speech for the opening of the Estates General. Chapter 61. Is history going to go astray? The king stood up and opened his blue cape with fleur-de-lis markings. The king was on the highest step, one step higher than his queen. Wearing this large cape, he had great difficulty walking, and it was obvious that this thick cape was very heavy. As for the scepter in the king's hand, Ning once thought it was a cane, and only when the king approached Ning did he see that it was a scepter representing royal power. The king did not wear a crown, or the crown was blocked by the pile of hair of an unknown animal on his head. There was a large necklace around his neck, which was so large that it looked like an accessory fixed on the cape. And Ning thought that this necklace looked very much like the props of the social brother he saw on Douyin before crossing. Thinking of this, he glanced at Queen Mary next to him. The queen was wearing an oversized necklace around her neck, which also had a vulgar atmosphere. Good guy, a social brother wearing gold and silver and his woman, why don't you take out your phone and do something? Queen Marie was once deceived and spent a lot of money to buy fake jewelry, but it seems that this did not reduce her preference for luxurious jewelry. Are you really going to go bankrupt? Why don't I see it? On the lower step of the steps below the king and the queen are the seats of the royal ministers. And Ning saw that the chair closest to the king's right was the royal financial steward Necker. This Swiss nobleman wore a very conspicuous large cross medal. The king also had the same medal, but it was a circle smaller than Necker's. He wore it on his neck with a thin gold chain, pressing on the thick gold chain. The king's cardinal seat was on the lower step, and the Pope's representative had a stern face and put on an aloof attitude. At this time, the king began his speech. Louis V, everyone. I am very happy to meet you here. As you all know, our country has fallen into serious financial difficulties recently and it is difficult to sustain. Look at the clothes I am wearing today. None of them are new. A king can only wear old clothes on such occasions. It can be seen how tight the expenses of the palace are. My wife Marie, she also wore an old skirt today. She made it from a skirt that she had worn twice. Her jewelry was her dowry brought from the Habsburgs. So in this situation, we must increase taxes. This is not only for the royal family itself, but also for the bankers and nobles who lent money to the royal family. If new sources of tax revenue are not opened up, the royal family will not even be able to repay the interest on the debt. Now Mr. Necker, the royal financial director, is racking his brains to borrow new money to pay off old debts, robbing Peter to pay Paul. This situation is definitely not sustainable. The king's complaints made all the representatives of the Third Estate in the audience frown. Danton, who was beside Ning, muttered, "Damn it, since there is no money, let that Austrian woman spend it sparingly." And Ning, His Majesty is very frugal. He can have fun as long as he has a lock. Most of the gentlemen around laughed when they heard Ning's humor, only Maximilien Robespierre still had a stern face. At this time, a gentleman in the front seat turned around and said, "As far as I know, the king occasionally goes hunting. He went to the royal hunting ground a few days ago. But compared to his queen, His Majesty is indeed a frugal person. It was mainly because Queen Marie was too much." After the complaint, the king continued, "I have read the general petitions submitted by each class. I think there are only two important things. One is to increase taxes to solve the current financial difficulties of the royal family. The second is to evenly distribute taxes. I agree with your request. The three classes should pay taxes equally and should not have the privilege of tax exemption. But I think those dangerous reforms you proposed are absolutely unacceptable. France has been a country with a monarch as its core since the time of my grandfather's grandfather. How long has it been since the glory of the Sun King? Many of you have heard your ancestors talk about it. The era of my grandfather's grandfather was so glorious, and the scene of all things thriving and flourishing is still before our eyes." And Ning was shocked. "What? You want 800,000 to 600,000, and the advantages and the odds? Louis V, since the French state system could usher in glory in the time of my great-grandfather, it can still be so now. Things that are not problematic do not need to be changed. I hope that all representatives can abandon those dangerous ideas and discuss on the basis of maintaining the French state system to discuss ways to overcome the current difficulties." At this time, the representatives of the Third Estate were in an uproar, and the whispers even drowned out the king's speech. The king seemed not to hear these whispers, as if he had completed an important task, and returned to his throne on the highest step with a sense of relief. At this time, the financial director Necker stood up. This Swiss nobleman often appeared at social gatherings in Paris. He was regarded as the representative of the progressive new aristocracy in the court. Necker walked forward slowly, considered for a while and spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, Your Majesty has just said that France has entered a state of unsustainability. Although it can barely maintain operations by relying on loans, the royal family's debt has now expanded to an incredible level. Even if the property of everyone present is added together, it may not be able to repay all the royal debts. I once suggested that Your Majesty go bankrupt, so that all debts can be written off." As a hardcore peace society player, and Ning thought to himself in the audience, "Don't, the bankruptcy debt is too terrible. Other countries will definitely take advantage of the fire, and the country will also explode a lot of landowner. It will take decades to recover from bankruptcy." In paradox games, when there is a financial crisis, you have to find a rich and victorious country to fight, and use the war reparations to fill the financial deficit. Necker, but His Majesty refused. He thought that would have too great an impact on the prestige of the royal family, and it is very likely that no one will be willing to lend money to the royal family in the future. But the financial crisis is a problem that cannot be solved, so we convened the three-level meeting. You can't imagine what this country would be like without a king, right? And Ning, no, not only can I imagine it, I have also seen it in history textbooks. Necker said a few more meaningless words, and then he was about to end his speech. The moment he turned around, someone from the Third Estate shouted, "Necker, where's the Constitution? Where is the Constitution we want to formulate?" Another representative shouted, "And what about the reform of the voting method? Please respond to our motion to vote by head." Necker pretended not to hear and returned to his chair. The ceremonial officer stepped forward and loudly suppressed the noise of the representatives. "Now, the three-level meeting officially begins. The first agenda is the review of representation. Each of the three levels returns to your assigned discussion room to review representation rights." And Ning recalled the process of the three-level parliament in his memory. He remembered that at this time, someone had to stand up and oppose the various levels to return to their own rooms to review the representative rights separately. This is actually a divide-and-rule approach. The three levels discussed behind closed doors, and the other two levels would definitely not agree to count votes by head. After that, the vote on the counting issue would probably be conducted in the form of one vote per level, which would absolutely not pass. Therefore, the first step of the struggle of the three-level conference was to refuse to review the representative rights separately. At this time, a representative of the third level should take the lead in opposing the separate review. And Ning forgot who this person was for a moment, and it is possible that his name was not recorded in history. He was looking forward to waiting for this person to stand up and oppose. However, no one opposed. At the urging of the ceremonial officer, some representatives of the second and first levels had already begun to prepare to leave. What the hell? Is history going to change? I just took away the position of the person who would stand up and oppose the separate review of the representative rights? Or is it that this era is full of randomness, so that person just didn't get elected? Faced with a history that was about to go off track, and Ning was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. Stop it. Stop it. Some cardinals from the first level have already stood up. Even some representatives from the third level are preparing to leave. Damn it, I can't control it. And Ning decided to stop history from going off track. He slapped his thigh and stood up. Wait a minute. I object. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62, Effective Opposition. And Ning actually hadn't organized his words yet. He just stood up in a hurry when he saw that history was about to go off track. At this time, facing the eyes focused on him, he felt a little embarrassed, but fortunately his brain didn't get stuck, so he continued, "We can't just leave like this. If, like in the past, each level separately reviews the qualifications of representatives and decides on their own, then in the future we will inevitably return to the old way. Gentlemen, think about what we are asking for. Our demand is to eliminate the barriers between the representatives of the three levels and realize head counting. To eliminate the barriers between the three levels, we must start with a review of the qualifications of representatives. We also need to know the situation of the representatives of the priests and nobles, and we must jointly review whether they are worthy of being representatives. If we compromise here, The situation will become that the priests review the priests, and the nobles review the nobles, and there will be no way to break the barriers. Gentlemen, we will never give in. We must review the qualifications of representatives here together. And Ning basically said whatever he thought of, without paying attention to any rules at all. After he finished speaking, he himself didn't know how good his speech was, and whether he could inspire everyone. He waited for everyone's reaction with some trepidation. At this time CI stood up. That's right. The qualifications of representatives should be examined together. If they are examined separately, I am a priest, but I am a representative of the third estate. In which hall should I sit? And Mr. Mirabeau, he is a nobleman and account registered in the Bureau des Personnel, but he is also in the third estate. Where should he sit in a separate review? Someone from the nobles shouted immediately, if that drunkard is willing to represent the third estate, let him represent it, we don't care. What about me? At this moment, the mayor of Paris, Mr. Bailey, not Mr. Bailey, stood up and said, I am also a nobleman and I often go to noble balls. Where should I go? Mirabeau also retorted indignantly, although I like to drink a little, you nobles drink more than me. It should be said that there are the most drunkards among the nobles. Wait a minute, Mr. Mirabeau, you are also a nobleman. When you say nobles, do you mean that you are a good-for-nothing among the nobles? Mirabeau's 7 wounds fist can't beat the nobles. Because most of the nobles are indeed good-for-nothings, and these rubbish are basically conservative nobles. Those who are not good-for-nothings are basically deeply influenced by the Enlightenment and are progressive nobles. The man who just scolded Mirabeau said angrily, damn Mirabeau, I want to duel with you. As a noble, you insult the entire noble class. And Ning, sir. This is the Estates General, a solemn meeting place, don't bring those barbaric behaviors here. Since you are a noble, you should know that your behavior in such occasions should be in line with the etiquette of the nobles. You don't want to be rude in front of the king and queen, right? The noble turned his head angrily and looked at Ning, and then he seemed to finally see who Ning was, and immediately calmed down. And Ning saw that the noble was scared, so he continued, after the meeting, if you want to duel, I am willing to accompany you. The noble pursed his lips and said nothing. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms and did not respond. At this time, more representatives of the third estate stood up and opposed the separate review of the qualifications of the representatives. Seeing that those who were about to leave just now had no intention of leaving now, and Ning sat down contentedly. After all, he did not want to really get involved in this matter. He was just forcing them to do something urgent. Leave the rest to the gentlemen, let them argue. At this time, Don Don patted Ning on the shoulder, well done. Think about it carefully. You pointed out the crux of the problem at once. If the various levels are separated today, it will be difficult to get together to discuss matters in the future. To change the tradition of the 3-level parliament, we must start with changing the tradition of separate discussions. And Ning, yes, that's it, you are right. I didn't think so much just now, I simply felt that I should not leave. You see, my speech is inconsistent. Because the fact is that his speech is inconsistent, and Ning said whatever he thought of, and he didn't have the ability to speak fluently. Danton laughed and said, how could that be? I think you said it very well. Concise, but sonorous and powerful. And Ning, really? I think. His words were interrupted by Robespierre's action of standing up. He and Danton turned their heads to look at Robespierre. Robespierre said loudly, we are here to achieve equality among all classes. Do nobles and priests have one more head than us? No. They are the same people as us. There is no need to divide them into other places for meetings based on their different professions. Our representatives of the third estate include everything, including nobles, priests, lawyers, judges and doctors. I think we should sit together to discuss matters. The third estate is everything. Robespierre is worthy of being a lawyer who has actually fought lawsuits in court for several years. His speech is sonorous and powerful. It seems that Robespierre in this time and space is also a lion who can make a shocking roar. But Robespierre's words were immediately refuted by the nobles. An aristocrat dressed like a rooster stood up and said angrily, how can you be the same as us? Look at you, wearing an ugly old coat, and then look at the gentlemen here, all dressed in neat clothes. No, we are different. Robespierre retorted loudly, do you only look at the appearance of people? Then Queen Marie is the most noble and dignified person in Paris. And Ning was drunk, what a joke, Queen Marie is still here. Because the quarrel broke out very suddenly, the king and queen had not left yet, and the queen was sitting in her seat and heard Robespierre's speech. If this happened in the era of Louis XIV, Robespierre would probably have donated it. It is only now that the royal power is restricted by the Supreme Court that Robespierre can be so presumptuous. Robespierre also felt that this seemed not so good, so he glanced at the Queen and said, "Don't get me wrong, I am praising your Majesty's beauty." And Ning looked at the Queen and felt that such a poor excuse would not work. Unexpectedly, Queen Marie seemed to be quite pleased. And Ning couldn't help but think, damn, is the Queen a fool? Wait, considering what she did in history, she is probably really a fool. But the Queen seemed to have come to her senses, and her face became very ugly. But even the Queen could not speak casually at this kind of meeting, so she could only purse her lips and stare at Robespierre angrily. Robespierre's focus was no longer on the Queen. He continued to stare at the little noble who had refuted him at the beginning. What standard do you use to judge a person's class? Money? There are bankers in the third class. Can you be richer than a banker? Is it a title? Mirabeau is a count. What is your title? Is it knowledge? Mr. Andy Frost next to me is a teacher at the Paris Military Academy, and he can speak almost all European languages. He is much more knowledgeable than you. And Ning felt bitter. I beg you, there are so many knowledgeable people here, and you don't give examples, but you have to cue me. What the hell? But Robespierre was still talking, with a set of parallel sentences. Then he concluded, no. Sir, I don't know your name, but I can assert that you are just an ordinary person in this room, nothing special. You are the same as us, and you should share the same fairness with us. And Ning immediately applauded, good. Well said. You are worthy of being the great lawyer Robespierre. Oh, wait a minute, calling him a great lawyer at this time seems to be sarcastic? No, I don't mean that. Robespierre maintained a humble attitude. I am not a great lawyer, I am just an ordinary lawyer and prosecutor from Arras. I have seen noble civilians and despicable nobles in court. I have long known that the distinction between nobles and civilians is unreliable. Today, we are here to abolish this division and realize true equality for all. I'm done. Robespierre sat down. After a short silence, thunderous applause rang out throughout the venue, and the general public standing on the stands and watching shouted loudly, repeating Robespierre's words loudly, everyone is equal. Equality. This is Robespierre's appearance at the Congress. The protagonist of this period performed exceptionally well right from the start. And Ning felt that he had made the right choice. What he didn't expect was that the meeting clerk's record read, just as the ceremonial officer announced the first agenda and the separate review of the qualifications of the representatives, Andy Frost, a representative from the Paris Military Academy, loudly raised his objection. So the meeting was forced to be interrupted, and a heated debate broke out between the representatives of the Third Estate and the representatives of the Second and First Estates. Yes, the clerk didn't write down Robespierre's name at all, but just covered it up. Andy Frost's name was clearly recorded in the meeting minutes. Chapter 63. Our name is National Assembly. In the following days, the Estates General spent all their time debating whether to examine the qualifications of representatives separately. However, the number of representatives of the Third Estate was the same as that of the First and Second Estates combined, so they were not actually in the majority. As a result, the meeting fell into an endless tug-of-war. In the first few days, Louis XV showed up, but later, probably because the content of the debate was too boring, His Majesty the King deserted. In this way, the Estates General, without the presence of royal relatives, continued to argue for 6 weeks over whether to examine the qualifications of representatives separately. On the morning of June 10th, the situation changed. That morning, Ning was dozing off at his seat, when suddenly a thunderclap sounded in the meeting hall. Enough. I've had enough. Ning was startled and woke up all of a sudden, and hurriedly looked around to grasp the situation. Then he saw a nobleman with a shoehorn face standing at his seat and making an impassioned speech. I'm tired of arguing with the common people. They will drag us into meaningless arguments. Look at what we have discussed in these 6 weeks. Nothing. We wasted 6 weeks. I propose that all the noble representatives follow me and we go to the place that originally belonged to us to discuss. Ning was shocked. This development was not the same as he remembered. He remembered that in the three-level meeting, it was the Third Estate that left the First and Second Estates behind and went it alone. How come it was the other way around? The horse-faced nobles cheering made many conservative nobles who were at odds with the Third Estate stand up. These diehards had been irreconcilable with the Third Estate for the past 6 weeks. The representatives of the third estate watched the nobles leave, and then a cardinal from the clergy stood up. Then let's leave too. His Majesty the King has long ordered us to review the right of representation in groups according to tradition. The priests stood up in twos and threes. And Ning heard someone say to Cis, Mr. Priest, you should persuade your colleagues. Cis stood up. So everyone's eyes were focused on Cis. He cleared his throat and said to the representatives of the third estate, who were looking at him eagerly, I don't intend to keep my colleagues at all. These days I have been reflecting on whether it is really necessary to bring the other two estates together for discussion. We are representatives of the third estate, and we represent 99% of the people in the country. The nobles and clergy only account for 1% of the population, and they are only representatives of 1% of the people. According to the principle of equality, even if the representatives of 1% of the people leave, it will not affect the authority of the meeting, right? The representatives of the third estate looked at each other in bewilderment. Cis continued, I propose that we start voting now. We represent 99% of the people in the country, and the parliament we form is the parliament representing all the people. After a short silence, Danton took the lead in shouting, Vote. We are the parliament representing all the people. After a moment, everyone began to shout, Vote. Vote. And Ning was relieved when he saw this scene, because history was back on track. Because he was completely relaxed, and Ning said, representing 99% is approximately equal to representing all. Mathematics tells us that there is nothing wrong with this. Mathematics does not lie. The representative next to him also shouted, That's right. Mathematics doesn't lie. 99% is everything. Cis turned to the clerk in charge of recording and said, Now we will start voting. The votes will be counted in a public manner. Please help supervise the voting, Mr. Clerk. The clerk was a little confused. Oh, I'm just a recorder. Yes, we will let you be responsible for recording, and you will see that this is a fair and just vote. Cis turned to the crowd and said, We still need 2 people to be responsible for the counting of votes. Which gentleman is willing to? Robespierre stood up, Let me do it. In my hometown, the court is very large. As a lawyer, I must have a clear and loud voice to ensure that the entire jury can hear my defense. Cis, okay Maximilien, you are responsible, and I will find someone to assist you. Dan rushed to Robespierre. Cis, okay gentlemen, do you agree that we can represent the entire republic? Please cast your vote. We guarantee that everyone will be treated fairly. The representatives who had been noisy just now quieted down. There were no convenient things like fountain pens in this era, so people had to write with feather pens dipped in ink. The representatives lined up, took paper from the clerk, and then wrote agree or disagree with the clerk's pen. Those who had written their votes walked up to Robespierre and handed him the paper with their own choices. Robespierre collected the ballots and read out the votes. Agree. Agree. Still agree. There is one against. Danton took a pen and drew 4 vertical and 1 slanted counting symbols on the notebook in front of him. In the West, this is roughly equivalent to the Chinese writing regular characters. 30 minutes later, the results came out. Robespierre announced loudly, 493 votes in favor, 41 votes against. I declare that we are now the National Assembly representing all the citizens. Everyone cheered. The crowds watching on both sides of the stands also burst into warm applause. Maximilien Robespierre loudly repeated what he had just said, From this moment on, we are no longer representatives of the Third Estate. We are representatives of the entire nation. Cis, that's right. I propose that we officially start the first agenda, reviewing the qualifications of representatives. At this time Mirabeau stood up and asked, Wait a minute. Before that, shouldn't we first decide what this new meeting is called? We can continue to use the name of the 3-level conference. The name should indicate that we are not the same as those insects before. After a brief silence, the representatives agreed loudly. That's right. The change starts with a name. To show that this is a brand new thing. Cis tried hard to suppress the noise of the crowd, and when the venue quieted down, he said, Then I propose that in order to clearly distinguish it from the 3-level conference, we should be called the Famous and Real Representative Conference. When Ning heard the name given by Cis, she was stunned. Damn it, are you serious? Isn't this name really funny? At this time, a man named Monnier stood up and said loudly, It should be called the Majority Parliament. Because we represent 99% of the people, it is an absolute majority. And Ning was even more shocked, because bouquet means majority in Russian. What a coincidence of names. My goodness, it was almost 120 years earlier, and Bouquet was born. Mirabeau stood up. I propose that we call it the French Representative Conference. As soon as the words fell, someone was unhappy. I am a fucking Breton. I do not belong to the same crown as you, France. This statement was immediately agreed by the Aquitanians. That's right, everyone who has played the paradox game Crusader Kings knows that the land of France now belongs to several different kingdoms. If you occupy all the current French lands in the game, you can at least usurp the three crowns of the Kingdom of Brittany, the Kingdom of Aquitaine and the Kingdom of France, and you can get Burgundy depending on the situation. In the game, if you master the crowns of the three kingdoms, you can become emperor and establish an empire. Therefore, Mirabeau's proposal failed because the French national consciousness had not yet fully awakened at this time. Several more proposals followed, but they were immediately opposed. Later, the names tended to become more and more weird, and some people even proposed to call it the parliament composed of lawyers, judges, factory owners and clerks. And Ning was the first to disagree, unless teachers, officers and leather workers were added to this list of professions. After arguing for a long time, and Ning couldn't stand it anymore, he slammed the table and stood up. Enough. I think it's better to call it the National Assembly. It's simple, straightforward, and sonorous. The meeting hall suddenly became quiet, and everyone was savoring Ning's proposal. At this time, CIS said, "Let's vote. Voting is a good thing. Maximilien, I'm counting on you again." More than half an hour later, the representatives passed the name proposed by Ning with 443 votes in favor and 91 votes against. The National Assembly was officially established on this day. Chapter 64, A Heavy Punch is Necessary. When everyone was shouting "Long live the National Assembly," CIS stood on the podium, as if he was the host of the entire meeting. He waited for the cheers to subside, and then said loudly, "Next, before the qualification review of representatives begins, I would like to emphasize our purpose. Everyone should know that our purpose is..." Mirabeau stood up and interrupted CIS loudly, "Constitution. Before the Constitution is formulated and the royal power is restricted, the National Assembly will never be dissolved." As soon as the voice fell, several people stood up together to support Mirabeau. One of them said loudly, "We are representatives elected by the people and the legal highest legislative body. We are the masters of the country. What we demand is a constitution." Countless people shouted together, "Constitution." CIS still stood there. He seemed to really regard himself as the host. After everyone's cheers subsided, he spoke again, "Yes, this is our goal. No one has the right to stop us from doing this. According to the principle of popular sovereignty, we, who represent the people, will exercise sovereignty as the people's agent. We are the highest power of the country. We have the right to formulate a constitution that is valid throughout the country." And Ning watched the passionate scene from the side and shouted "Constitution" several times. The meeting continued to move forward and began to examine the qualifications of representatives. At this time, Danton suddenly had a question and said to Ning, "Now there are only us from the Third Estate. We are examining the qualifications of representatives. Isn't it the same as before, with each estate examining separately?" And Ning, "No, it's different. Because our vote just now has actually declared the three-level parliament illegal. We are the highest authority representing this country. In other words, we have expelled those masters and priests from the ranks of representatives and do not recognize their right to represent." Danton, "But don't the people of the other two estates know this?" "They will know." In the next few days of meetings, the Third Estate occupied the room originally used to hold the plenary meeting of the three estates, as if they were the masters of this room. After completing the examination of the qualifications of representatives, the National Assembly began the next topic, formulating a constitution. On the morning of the 13th, the Parliament voted to declare all current taxes illegal, but before formulating a new and more reasonable taxation system, they would not be abolished for the time being, but only suspended. When the Parliament announced that the tax was illegal, the crowd cheered deafeningly. It seemed that as long as there was no tax, they could afford the already frighteningly expensive bread. The progress of the meeting received the attention of public opinion throughout Paris. Marat wrote a long article almost every day to comment on the Parliament's agenda for the day. Thanks to public opinion, the representatives of the First and Second Estates who left a meeting were able to understand what the Third Estate was doing, and knew that the Third Estate had skipped them and started drafting the Constitution on its own. On the morning of the 19th, Ning attended the National Assembly's discussion at the Palace of Versailles as usual, and suddenly someone exclaimed, "Everyone, look!" Ning looked in the direction of the voice and saw a large number of representatives of the First Estate wearing clerical robes entering the room. Mirabeau, standing on the podium, asked loudly, "Gentlemen, you have come to the wrong place. This is not a meeting place of the three-level parliament, but the meeting place of the National Assembly. Do you represent the people?" The leading priest answered loudly, "Of course we represent the people, and the priests are also part of the people. We heard that you are drafting a constitution, so we came here. We can't let CIS represent the priests of the whole country alone." CIS stood up. "Of course I have no right to represent the priests of the whole country. Let us warmly welcome my colleagues. Their joining will greatly increase our legitimacy. Their joining is equivalent to declaring that the three-level conference is in name only. From now on, there will be no representatives of the three levels, only representatives of the people. Long live the representatives of the people." Someone shouted. And Ning followed suit, "Long live." And Ning has been having a great time these days. He doesn't take the initiative to speak, but just shouts with everyone. When everyone shouts for the Constitution, he shouts for the Constitution. If everyone shouts "Long live," he will shout "Long live." Anyway, and Ning can be described in one word: muddle through. If his initial attempt to stand out was forced to prevent history from going off track, then his current muddle through fully reveals his true nature. And Ning's goal has not changed since the beginning. "I want to sit on the fence. I want to slack off. I want to become a big shot of the French Revolution without much effort. As long as history is not on danger of going off track, no one can stop me from slacking off." At this time, also in the Palace of Versailles, Queen Marie broke into Louis V's workshop. Louis V frowned. "Why are you here?" This workshop is Louis V's paradise, where he is obsessed with tinkering with various mechanical devices, mainly various locks. Marie looked at the pile of locks and various tools on the table in front of Louis V with a speechless face. "What time is it? You are still tinkering with your locks." "Louis V, I have finished reading the documents today. Now it's mine. Do you know what those third-class bastards are doing? They just announced that they are representatives of the country and will exercise national sovereignty. They are going to turn the world upside down. You, Louis, are the owner of national sovereignty." Louis V asked in surprise. "They want to exercise national sovereignty? Really? Of course it's true. It's written in black and white in the minutes of the meeting. All of Paris knows it, and you are the only one who is still in the dark." Louis V looked at a loss, his fingers awkwardly twisted together. Then what should I do?" "Marie, of course, declare them illegal and dissolve this National Assembly." Louis V looked very hesitant. "I can't dissolve them. I still hope that the three-level conference will pass a tax increase bill to solve the financial problem. You see, you need money to buy all kinds of clothes and jewelry, and I also need to buy new locks. Don't mention your locks." Marie slapped the table. "They want to learn from the British to establish a constitutional monarchy. Learn from the British. In France, the most serious curse is, judging from your posture, you are British. The Anglo-French feud is no joke. It started from the time of the Maid of Orleans." "Louis V, that's definitely not possible." "Yes, it's definitely not possible." "Then what are you waiting for? You are the Supreme King. How can you maintain the royal power established by your grandfather's grandfather with these insects? We must strike hard. Disband them. Today I heard that a group of priests plan to join the ranks of civilians. When they really become representatives of the nation, it will be too late. They must be disbanded now. Hold a meeting according to the original system of the three-level conference. You must drive them out of the hall they are currently occupying and drive them into the small halls for separate meetings of different levels." Louis V hesitated for a few seconds and sighed. "Okay. I will go to the venue tomorrow and ask them to disband." Chapter 65 We refuse to leave. June 20th, as soon as the delegates arrived at the Palace of Versailles, they saw that the soldiers had blocked the venue. Mirabeau was shouting like a rooster to the officers who blocked the venue, "We are representatives of the National Assembly. We want to go in for the meeting." And Ning saw this scene and was overjoyed. "It's coming, the tennis court declaration is coming." But he pretended to be puzzled on the surface, and pulled a representative who came earlier and asked, "What's going on?" Although Ning didn't know the man who was pulled, he knew Ning, so he responded directly and respectfully, "Mr. Frost, as you can see, the soldiers have blocked the venue and won't let us go in to continue the meeting." And Ning said, "Oh. At this time, the man said again, "By the way, Mr. Frost, you are an officer, right? Can you order the soldiers to let us in?" And Ning thought to himself, "Don't mess with me. I have become a big boss in the parliament inexplicably because I forced myself to stand out last time. Since then, I have been restless even if I want to slack off, and there are always people asking me for my opinion. I will not speak this time. Let's go to the tennis court to exercise, just like the history of another time and space." However, and Ning was still a little confused, "I will not be forced to take the lead this time, will I? No way? Am I the son of luck? The opportunity that should not have come to me is coming to me? No way, no way?" At this time, and Ning heard someone say loudly, "Since the king won't let us in, let's find a big enough place to continue the discussion." Another person shouted, "Go to the royal tennis court. There's a big place there." And Ning breathed a sigh of relief. "Fortunately, not everything will require me to take the lead." More representatives followed and shouted, "Go to the tennis court. Discuss there." Seeing this scene, and Ning also followed the crowd, "Go to the tennis court." So a large group of representatives began to move while cursing. And Ning followed the crowd. Halfway through the walk, Robespierre somehow came to Ning, so he said angrily, "It's the king. The king wants to oppose us and oppose the formulation of a constitution." And Ning echoed, "It must be the king. Who would willingly hand over power?" Robespierre continued, "Why doesn't your majesty understand that constitutional monarchy is also good for him? If he continues like this, we might learn from the Americans and drive the king away." Good guy. Robespierre already wanted to drive the king away at this time. Danton followed and said, "Isn't this just right? Among the representatives of the Second Estate, there's Marcus Lafayette, who is a hero of the American War of Independence." "What hero of the American War of Independence? How dare you call Mr. Lafayette the founding father of the United States?" And Ning thought. At this time, we arrived at the tennis court. The representatives entered the venue one after another, cursing and swearing. Then Mirabeau found a table and jumped on it, saying loudly, "Everyone. This is the king's response. He wants to force us to give up what we are doing. No, this cannot be allowed. Everyone, I think we should reiterate the previous declaration. Unless a reasonable constitution that meets the current requirements is designated and promulgated and implemented, the National Assembly will never be dissolved before that." Everyone cheered together. Many onlookers lying on the windows of the indoor tennis court also echoed Mirabeau's words loudly. CIS also stood on the table and said beside Mirabeau, "I propose that we publish this statement publicly. And everyone signs and sends a copy to the king. Good. Let him know our determination. We will never compromise with the royal power." In fact, the royal power in France has been restricted a lot in recent decades, but the restrictions mainly come from the Supreme Court composed of nobles. In fact, it has always been the nobles who have been fighting against the royal power during this period, which is a bit similar to the struggle between the royal power and the power of the prime minister in China. But this time, the Third Estate challenged the royal power. The statement was quickly drafted, and then the representatives signed one by one. And Ning quietly wrote her name in the corner to make it less conspicuous. The statement was sent to Louis V. "This is outrageous." Queen Marie angrily slammed the table. "How can you tolerate them handing you this kind of thing? You should send everyone who signed it to the Bastille." Louis V frowned. "My dear wife, do you know that there are 500 people? The Bastille can't hold so many people." "I don't care." "Then arrest a few of the leaders. For example, arrest Andy Frost last time. That cobbler tarnished my ball. He stepped on someone's feet at the ball and made a fool of himself." And Ning probably didn't know that Queen Marie remembered him because he made a fool of himself at the Queen's ball. Louis V was embarrassed. He didn't commit any crime. Isn't this a crime? Mary pointed at the statement on the table. "They all sent you this kind of thing. This group of people are no longer ordinary representatives, they are unruly people. This is a rebellion. We must strike hard." The king held his forehead. "I thought, closing the venue would make them restrain a little. Don't you understand? We must use the most severe thundering means to deal with them. Send out the royal guards." When Mary said this, it seemed that the royal guards could solve all problems like a blank slate. The king held his forehead. "I'll think about it. How about this? I will hold a royal meeting tomorrow and personally explain the pros and cons to them." The next day, when the representatives were about to go to the tennis court to continue their meetings, the news of the king's royal meeting came again. This time it was in the royal meeting hall that the National Assembly had occupied before, and all three levels had to participate. So when Ning entered the hall that day, in addition to the old faces that he was used to seeing, there were also many faces that he hadn't seen for a long time. The most eye-catching part of the meeting was the area where the priests sat. It was impossible not to be eye-catching. The priests' clothes were all solid colors. The first row was full of bright red cardinals, and the back row was black like crows. The colors were very impressive. This was especially true for Ning, a paradox player. In Paradox's game Europa Universalis, the rebel flags were red and black, so when Ning saw the color scheme of the priest's area, he immediately couldn't hold back. Wow, a whole block of Lindenwen. Lindenwen is a stock of Europa Universalis. In the game, the rebel leader is usually called Leader 1. As a result, when the folks translated it into Chinese, they ingeniously transliterated this default name into Lindenwen, maybe because the priests and nobles were all there. The members of the National Assembly who had been so arrogant in this hall in the past few days were now very honest. They sat in the blocks facing Louis V's position. And Ning had been a slacker for a few days, and today he was sandwiched between Danton and Robespierre again. In the past few days, Robespierre and Danton actively participated in the meeting, either giving speeches or listening to other speeches, and all sat in the front row of the meeting. And Ning played out his habit from college days and sat in the last row. Anyway, he would not speak on the stage, just slacking off, and there was no need to sit so far in the front. But today the situation was different, and Ning was sandwiched by his two old friends again. At this time, Paris was already very hot, and the representatives crowded together waiting for Louis V. Many people's wigs were soaked with sweat. At this time, Louis V finally arrived late. He glanced at the members of the Third Estate, the National Assembly, and curled his lips slightly. The ceremonial officer announced loudly that everyone stood up and saluted the king. Compared with the other two estates, the members of the National Assembly stood up slowly and saluted reluctantly. After the salute, the ceremonial officer announced that King Louis V would speak. This time the king was not dressed up, so he did not wear the heavy blue iris cloak. He wore a blue coat and a blue and white ribbon. He still didn't wear a crown. Perhaps in this era, crowns were ceremonial items that only appeared on special occasions. Louis V took a few steps forward and looked around the room. "I've heard some bad rumors," he said. "Some people have ignored the long-standing tradition of the Estates General and set up a National Assembly. This is absolutely unacceptable," the king said as he glanced at the side door of the room. And Ning immediately looked to the side, and then there was a small door there. Queen Marie was standing at the door and peeping at the situation in the venue. It was as if the head teacher came to the back of the class to peek during evening self-study. And Ning was shocked and thought, Locksmith, you are such a waste, right? If your grandfather's grandfather, the Sun King, knew that you were held in the palm of an Austrian woman's hand, he would cry. Louis V continued, "I now ask you to stop this practice immediately. Return to the normal procedures of the Estates General. In addition, some people have been occupying this hall, which is also wrong. According to the rules, this hall is the place for the royal court meetings of the three levels together. No one level can occupy this hall alone. It is not allowed to discuss matters here when there is no imperial council meeting. This is a tradition that has been established since my grandfather's grandfather's generation. You must abide by the tradition. Now, I order you to disperse immediately and return to the room assigned to you for the meeting." After saying this, Louis V nodded to the Master of Ceremonies. The Master of Ceremonies stepped forward and announced, "Your Majesty orders that everyone return to the assigned meeting place immediately to discuss matters." And Ning was shocked. What kind of operation was this? In order to expel the National Assembly that occupied the Imperial Council Hall, an Imperial Council was specially convened? Then Ning suddenly remembered that this scene was also a famous scene that was recorded in history. And this was Mirabeau's highlight moment. Mirabeau relied on the image he established this time to get along with everyone for several years, and was sent to the Pantheon after his death. Of course, his letter to the Queen was later exposed, and everyone found out that he was actually a secret advisor to the royal family, and his body was moved out of the Pantheon again. In the entire course of the French Revolution, there were only two people whose graves were moved in this way. One was Mirabeau, who was moved out of the Pantheon, and the other was Napoleon Bonaparte, who was moved into the Invalides. After remembering the script, Ning began to prepare to witness history with great anticipation. After the ceremonial officer finished speaking, The first to move were noble representatives sitting on the right-hand side of the representatives of the third estate. They stood up in twos and threes and began to walk out the door. Then the cardinals on the left also began to move. The representatives of the National Assembly looked at each other, and no one stood up. Seeing this, the ceremonial officer urged loudly, "Representatives of the third estate, why don't you move? Please get up and leave immediately. This is the order of His Majesty the King." And Ning looked at Mirabeau and thought to himself, "It's your turn. Go ahead, Mirabeau." But Mirabeau did not move. At this time, Louis V questioned, "Third estate. What are you doing? Didn't you hear what I said?" And Ning was almost dying of anxiety. What a good opportunity this was. Mirabeau could use this opportunity to reply to His Majesty the King and say his famous line, "The French people chose us, and no one can make us leave unless we use bayonets. Move quickly, Mirabeau. You are not Theo, why don't you move?" The representatives of the National Assembly continued to look at each other, and everyone, including Mirabeau, remained silent. Danton was desperately poking Ning's waist and whispered, "Come on, do something, Andy." "No. I won't do it. The last time I saw history was about to go off track and was forced to help. The result was recorded in the meeting minutes. Became the leader of everyone. I don't want to stand out again. I want to sit on the fence, not to be your leader. You go find Mirabeau." This is his highlight moment. However, Mirabeau did not stand up. Didn't he shout very loudly on the tennis court yesterday? He was scared when the king came? After all, at this time, although everyone was already discussing limiting the royal power, they still maintained a certain respect for the king himself. After all, the mainstream idea now is constitutional monarchy, and everyone still thinks that there should be a monarch. Louis V urged again, "What are you still waiting for?" Perhaps the silence of the members of the National Assembly gave Louis V the illusion that I am very capable. He became visibly tougher and asked, "Are you going to start a rebellion?" The people in the National Assembly continued to remain silent. And Ning saw that these people were not mentally prepared to openly oppose the king. After all, their current advocacy was still constitutional monarchy, and it was not to the point of Louis must die and the revolution must live. The appearance of the king made the course of history deviate from its original track. Originally, Mirabeau stood up when only a ceremonial officer asked the representatives to disband. It stands to reason that the general trend of history is fixed, and the process will become different due to some random factors. It should be normal for this degree of change to occur. The Great Revolution should still break out afterwards. But the problem is that Ning had never read the script for such a great revolution. It is very scary if you have never read the script for such a turbulent era. If you stay in Paris in the future, people will be beheaded by the guillotine every day in Paris, and you may be killed if you are not careful. If you go to the countryside, you will encounter royalist rebellions and kill patriots wearing tricolor emblems everywhere. If you don't wear the tricolor emblem, you will be sent to the guillotine by the already bloodthirsty Republicans as royalists. After thinking about it, it is better for history to follow the original path. In this way, and Ning at least knows when to turn to which position and realize flexible and independent fence sitting. If you can do this, you can stay in Paris. No matter how much the royalists rebel, Paris will be stable as the base camp of the revolution. So Ning stood up. Louis V thought he was going to leave, and immediately laughed. "Very good, that's it, leave. And Ning, go tell your master. We came here according to the will of the people. Only the power of the bayonet can make us leave." Louis V was stunned. Obviously, he was not mentally prepared to disperse the representatives with a bayonet. In addition, the guards near the venue had been listening to the National Assembly's discussion for so long that they had already been transformed. If they ordered the soldiers to use bayonets against the representatives, it would be unknown who the soldiers would point their bayonets at. With Ning taking the lead, Mirabeau also stood up. "That's right. Only bayonets can make us leave." The Count blushed and looked very excited. Cis also said sarcastically, "Your Majesty has not changed his old habits until now." Louis V looked at the angry representatives with trembling lips. Suddenly, he turned around and fled. Mirabeau walked straight out of the area where the representatives were sitting, came to the ceremonial officer, pushed him away, and then shouted, "We are here, holding a meeting. We will never leave this room until a constitution is formulated and promulgated. Let your Majesty drive us away with bayonets." Chapter 66 Victory, huh? Seeing that the king had escaped, the royal ceremonial officer also turned around and escaped. The representatives once again completely occupied the imperial conference hall. And Ning saw that history was not in danger of going off track, so he sat down hurriedly. In the subsequent meetings, he was thinking about one question: damn it, I have replaced Mirabeau for the first 2 times, will I use Mirabeau's script in the future? Mirabeau died of illness during the revolution, so he was treated as having his grave moved. If he had been healthy and not died of illness, he would probably have been guillotined. Once his relationship with the royal family was exposed, he would have to go to the guillotine. It is not a good thing to use this script. I have to stay away from Mirabeau in the future. And Ning vaguely suspected that he had some special ability to absorb luck. As long as he was present, those who were supposed to be pretending by others would become his own. He was just here to fish, but he suddenly became an opinion leader, and he also contradicted the king and shouted to the king, "Use bayonets to deal with us." If King Louis V got carried away and really ordered the use of bayonets to disperse the delegates, wouldn't I be the first to bear the brunt? I would be taken to the Bastille and be enlightened, right? Fortunately, the locksmith king was as weak as Ning knew, and he was unable to stand up. If only the king had been a little tougher. And Ning waved away the thought. Anyway, the matter was over, and she was not arrested, so there was no need to think about it. At this moment, Ning suddenly saw Christina appear at the side door of the hall, desperately gesturing to Ning. Ning stood up in confusion. Cis thought he was going to speak, so he stopped and asked, "Mr. Frost, do you have anything to say?" Ning awkwardly found an excuse, "I want to pee." Everyone laughed. Cis tried to keep a straight face, then, "Go quickly and come back soon." Ning immediately ran away and left the hall through the small door. Christina was already waiting for him outside. As soon as she saw him, she rushed up and held his hand. "Why are you still sitting in the room? Run." The queen was very angry just now. She asked the king to be tough and put you, the leader, in the Bastille. Ning was shocked. "Really? Really? I heard it clearly beside me. And then I immediately found an excuse to come and inform you." "Ning, what did the king say? Did he agree?" "No, the king said that if he wants to arrest someone, he has to go through the Supreme Court. The nobles will not agree to him arresting a representative. But the queen immediately said that he can cooperate with the conservative nobles." Ning breathed a sigh of relief and patted Christina on the shoulder. "Come on, don't worry, even the conservative nobles are thinking about enacting a constitution to limit the royal power. Limiting the royal power is the consensus of all levels. The king can't find a partner." Christina still looked very worried, so Ning urged, "You can't leave your post for too long, right? Go back quickly." The young girl, "No, it's not young now, it should be called a young woman." The young woman stared at Andy's face for a few seconds, and then said solemnly, "If I suddenly send you a message and ask you to run, you must run immediately at that time." Ning nodded, "I will." But Christina looked unconvinced. "I will take it seriously." "No, it's true." "What do you mean by taking it seriously?" Christina sighed. "Hey, it's not that I can't understand you. After all, you are so looking forward to Parliament and change." No, you are wrong. I am looking forward to the opening of the famous scene. Why do you say that I am an active member of GM? Christina continued, "After all, you have the whole of France in your heart." "Miss, you are getting more and more outrageous. Why do you say that I am a French person who cares about the country and the people? I am not. I am Chinese, a history enthusiast, and a fan of paradox games, that's all." Christina shook her head. "Forget it, let it be." "What do you mean forget it? Explain it clearly." "I'm telling you that you have a big misunderstanding, okay?" Just before Ning was about to do something to change Christina's misconception, she turned and left. Ning watched her back disappear into the distance. He scratched his head, turned back to the hall, found a chair at the edge of the venue and sat down, watching the representatives discussing the bill passionately. In the next few days, the meeting at Versailles calmed down temporarily. 2 days after the public coup, 60 noble representatives joined the meeting. A day later, more nobles and clergy joined the parliament. Finally, at the end of June, the king gave in and ordered all the remaining representatives to join the National Assembly. In this way, the National Assembly had representatives from all 3 estates and officially became a legitimate legislative body. From this day on, the parliament began to discuss the basic principles of the constitution. Many people seemed to think that the matter was over and France would embark on the path of constitutional monarchy. That night, Ning came back from Versailles and saw Fanny disinfecting her arm with wine. Ning was shocked. "What happened to you?" "Nothing, I was caught in a riot when I went out to buy something. I saw that the effect of washing the wound with wine seemed to be good last time, so I followed suit." Ning hurried forward to check Fanny's wound. After confirming that it was just a minor wound, he breathed a sigh of relief and asked casually, "Is the situation on the street bad?" "Very bad. Someone robbed a bakery today, and the police were arresting people all over the street and whipping them when they were caught." Fanny raised her head and looked at Ning. "Mr. Frost, will all this stop after the Constitution is enacted?" Ning shook her head. "Don't be silly, the Constitution can't replace bread." "Then when will all this end?" "Ning, when the grain harvest is good in autumn." "That's right, this crisis that started in 1788 in history did not improve until the grain harvest in 1789. But because of the coincidence of time, everyone had the illusion that the price of bread would drop after the Constitution was enacted." Fanny looked at Ning in surprise. "Do we have to rely on a good harvest to alleviate the situation? Then what you are doing is useless." "How can it be useless? This will transform the whole of France and is the beginning of great progress for all mankind." "But I can't tell Fanny about this. After all, it is an evaluation made from the perspective of future generations." "Ning, the streets will be more chaotic recently. If possible, try not to go out." Fanny shook her head. "No, how can I buy necessities for my family if I don't go out? I still have to take care of you." "Ning, just take food from the Duke's mansion, and other expenses don't need to be supplemented for the time being. It's better to pay attention to safety during this period." Fanny saw that she couldn't persuade Ning, so she nodded in agreement. Ning breathed a sigh of relief and turned her head to look out a window. At this time, the night was gradually covering the entire royal palace and the surrounding blocks. That night, the Palace of Versailles, Louis V's bedroom. Louis V, with a distressed face, finally couldn't stand Marie's repeated requests and sighed. "I will sign an order to let the Royal Swiss Mercenary Corps enter Versailles." Queen Marie was overjoyed. "You finally agreed." "That's right, since they want bayonets, then give them bayonets." Louis V pursed his lips. "I need to think about it again. Maybe when they see the Corps entering Versailles, they will retreat." Marie pleaded, "No more hesitation, we must use thundering means." Louis V was silent. Marie continued to plead, "My dear, you are the king of this country. But they dare to talk to you like that. If this goes on, the royal family will have no prestige. You make concessions again and again, but they crave more. No more concessions. You have seen the results of the concessions. It's time to let them know that you are still their king." Finally, Louis V sighed, then put away the fatigue on his face, and put on a serious and tough expression. "Maybe you are right, it's time to do something hard." Chapter 67, A Sharp Turn for the Worse. July 4th, Ning came to Versailles for a meeting as usual. As soon as he got off the carriage, he saw soldiers from an unknown legion marching in a neat line past the gate of the Palace of Versailles. The wide column of 4 people in a row marched for a long time. Ning estimated that there were at least 20,000 people in this army. After the line finally passed, Ning hurriedly joined the representatives at the door of the Imperial Conference Hall and asked, "Where did the army come from?" "I don't know. From the language of the officers' orders, it seems to be Swiss mercenaries. The garden of the Palace of Versailles is now full of tents, and the army is stationed there." At this time, someone hurried over and said, "Something is wrong." The king replaced the soldiers guarding the Imperial Conference Hall with Swiss, and they are all German-speaking Swiss. The native language of Switzerland is Romansh, which only a few people can speak. Most places in Switzerland speak German, French and Italian. Swiss mercenaries are very common in France, Germany and Italy. It seems that the king has transferred his Swiss mercenary corps to the vicinity of Versailles. Danton said loudly, "The king is going to take action against the parliament. Because they are Swiss mercenaries, they don't care about the French constitution, and they won't have any psychological burden when dissolving the parliament." After Danton's reminder, the representatives all woke up from their dreams. "How can this be? It must be the idea of that Austrian woman. She is so bad. Let's go and petition His Majesty. Let him transfer the troops away." The call of "let's petition" was responded by most people, so a large group of people drove straight to the place where the king lived. Ning watched the whole process. Although Danton and Robespierre cast their eyes at him several times, it seemed that they wanted him to come out to preside over the overall situation, but Ning pretended not to see it. At this time, Ning had already remembered what this incident was. This was one of the inducements for the later capture of the Bastille. Because the king showed a tendency to use the army to dissolve the parliament, the people of Paris protested to support the parliament. It happened that at this time, ordinary people in Paris were starving and making trouble all day long, and the result was a big one. Ning followed the team to the palace gate, but the palace guards were replaced by Swiss mercenaries. A mercenary officer stopped the representatives from moving forward in French with a heavy accent. Mirabeau said angrily, "Why did you replace the palace guards? Is it because His Majesty the King knows that the guards are inclined to the National Assembly?" The Swiss officer put on a proud attitude, "No comment." "What do you mean by no comment?" "It means literally. His Majesty the King has the right to decide anything and does not need to inform anyone." The representatives looked at each other. "Robespierre, since they don't let us go in to see the king, we will submit a motion to withdraw the troops to the king through the formal document submission channel. We should return to the conference room now and start drafting the motion immediately." The representatives immediately agreed with Robespierre's words and began to return to the conference room. When they arrived at the conference room, Ning suddenly found that the number of soldiers around the conference room had increased several times, and they prevented the Parisians who came to watch the meeting from entering the stands, and only allowed the people to watch the progress of the meeting through the windows on the second floor. Mirabeau questioned the leading officer, "What does this mean?" The officer's French was much more standard, although he still had a bit of a German accent. "This is for your safety. The security in Paris has not been very good recently. Many good gentlemen have been hurt by thugs." Mirabeau pointed to the people who came to watch the meeting. "Open your eyes and look, which one of them looks like a thug? We are just taking precautions. The representatives are important figures in France and we cannot afford to make any mistakes." The officer responded politely. The Swiss soldiers behind him all had stern faces, exuding a murderous atmosphere. Danton whispered in Ning's ear, "Damn, it looks like our locksmith has finally become tough. The parliament may be dissolved." Robespierre was very excited when he heard this. He said, "Even if we are driven out of Versailles, we can find a place to hold a meeting in Paris. The process of drafting the constitution cannot be stopped, and France cannot stop progressing." A representative heard what Robespierre said and asked, "What if the king wants to put us in the Bastille? Then we will hold a meeting in prison. Use loud shouting to convey information to each other." Robespierre said firmly, "No matter what, we must not stop. As long as we don't stop, everything in the past will not be in vain." Ning looked at Robespierre from the side, thinking, "Well, Robespierre is worthy of being called the Lion of the Republic. This speech has an interesting flavor." Mirabeau took over the conversation. "Now is not the time. After all, the king has not really ordered the army to take action. We should submit our motion immediately. Without further ado, start drafting the motion document." That night, the document from the National Assembly requesting the king to withdraw the Swiss mercenaries was delivered to Louis V's desk. While Louis V was reading the document, Queen Marie rushed in. "You can't transfer the army. Dear. Don't listen to them. You should order the army to take action immediately." Louis V looked up at Marie and answered slowly, "My Marie, it seems that the situation is under control now. From this document, the representatives have already felt the pressure. As long as the army continues to be stationed in the Palace of Versailles, it won't be long before the representatives will raise their hands and surrender." Louis V said with a smug smile, "Then everything will be the same as before. The only problem is that we can't increase taxes." Queen Marie said with a worried look, "Will things really go so smoothly? I think we should make a concerted effort to avoid more trouble at night. Don't worry, take a look at this document, they are already scared." Louis V pushed the document in his hand forward. Queen Marie stepped forward to take the document and read it carefully. Then she smiled. "I knew that they didn't have the courage to disobey the royal power. I think we should let the Swiss Legion drill in front of the parliament every day and continue to scare them hard." Louis V smiled and said, "That's a good idea. I will order the Swiss to do so immediately." As the days passed, the number of Swiss Legion guards surrounding the parliament increased, and the Swiss mercenaries began to drill in front of the parliament. Mirabeau was so angry that his teeth itched. "This is a threat to us. Damn it, is there no way to change this situation?" He looked around the hall, and all the representatives of the National Assembly had bitter faces. Yes, when the National Assembly encountered the Swiss mercenaries, it was like a scholar encountering a soldier, and it was difficult to explain the reason. The parliament now had no way to make the king withdraw his troops. At this time, someone suggested loudly, "We can ask Mr. Necker, the director of finance. Let him take our request." Robespierre sighed, "Request? We can only ask the king for mercy. Not long ago, we were still arrogantly asking the king to give up his power." Chapter 68. You asked for it. That night, Ning just returned to his residence near the royal palace and saw Fanny standing at the door waiting for him with a worried look on her face. She kept staring at the carriage Ning was sitting in. When the carriage stopped and Ning got out of the carriage, the maid breathed a sigh of relief. "Ning, what's wrong?" In the afternoon, news came that His Majesty the King might want to arrest all the representatives. Rumor has it that the guards have been relieved of their duties, and now the Swiss mercenaries are guarding the palace. Ning, yes, His Majesty the King has mobilized more than 20,000 Swiss mercenaries, but they did not take over the defense of the palace. It seems that the Swiss soldiers were mainly mobilized to deal with the National Assembly. The defense of the palace is still the responsibility of the guards. Fanny, isn't the situation very dangerous now? How about you not go to the meeting starting tomorrow? Ning shook her head. How can I not go? If we don't go to the meeting, it will happen to be exactly what the Queen wants. The more times like this, the more we cannot show weakness. Isn't it dangerous? Someone spread the word today that you have been arrested by the King's Swiss army. I'm back safe and sound, said Ning. But today, in the square near the royal palace, someone called on everyone to take action and rescue the representatives with practical actions. Ning curled his lips. The information that Fanny gave him clearly showed that the whole situation was gradually moving towards the final general eruption. As long as the king did a few more things that would irritate the Parisians, the volcano would be ignited by him personally. Ning's attitude towards this was, "Hurry up, Your Majesty, hurry up and die. If you don't ignite this volcano, history will change. Come on, Your Majesty." But Ning couldn't show this attitude of fearing chaos in the world. He had to pretend to be worried. The current situation is not that bad. Believe me, Fanny, don't worry too much. Fanny nodded. At this time, a newsboy ran over waving a newspaper. "Sir, look at the latest special edition. The representatives were surrounded by the Swiss Legion, and the National Assembly is in danger." Ning thought to himself, "Bullshit, I am a member of the National Assembly." Although the representatives were indeed surrounded by Swiss soldiers, the meeting process was not affected at all, and personal freedom was not threatened. Don't talk as if the representatives have been detained by the king. Seeing that Ning did not show much interest, the newsboy added, "Sir, look, France is in danger." Ning vaguely felt that the child would not leave unless he bought a copy, so he took out a few copper coins and said, "Give me a copy." "Okay, take it." The newsboy happily took the copper coins and stuffed the newspaper into Ning's hand. Ning unfolded the newspaper and looked at the front page. A line of big words caught his eye, "Danger. The achievements so far may be destroyed by one paragraph." Looking more carefully, the entire article on the front page was exaggerating anxiety. Facts have proved that media in any era will sell anxiety. At the end of the article, the author, who signed as Irene, raised his arms and shouted, "Citizens, take action and save the future of France." Fanny stood by and stretched her head to read the article, and then said, "Mr. Frost, you just said that the situation is not that dangerous." "Well, it's not that dangerous. I personally think that His Majesty the King has not made up his mind to use bayonets against the National Assembly. In fact, I don't think he has the courage to do so. He is just a locksmith. But if Queen Marie blows the pillow winds for a few more days, it may not be certain. The most urgent task is to prevent the king from making up his mind to clear the place by force. This task was completed by the people of Paris in history. Ning, okay, don't worry about the situation. I'm hungry. Is dinner ready? Fanny, I'm ready and I'm waiting for you to come back. Do you want to eat now? Yes, I want to eat now. Ning walked towards the house where she lived. On the royal palace square next to the house, the citizens gathered together and were reading the special edition that just sold anxiety. The next day, Ning took a carriage to Versailles to attend the National Assembly. When he arrived at Versailles, he found that a large number of people had gathered in front of the palace. Many people even climbed over the palace wall and entered the royal lawn. As soon as Ning got off the car, everyone cheered for him. "Mr. Delegate, we support you." Ning waved to everyone, then walked through the crowd and entered the Imperial Conference Hall. Danton came up to him and said, "They shout this to everyone." This is thanks to the special edition yesterday. Now everyone in the city thinks that the delegates are going to be arrested by the Swiss Legion. Ning shrugged and asked Mirabeau, "What is our topic today?" "Mr. Necker will come today," Mirabeau replied. "We have to persuade him to pass on the message to His Majesty the King on our behalf and ask the King to withdraw his troops." At this time, someone shouted, "Mr. Necker is here." Everyone turned their heads together. Louis V's financial director walked into the conference hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have received your letters, so what are you going to do after shouting here?" Mirabeau, "Mr. Necker. Please tell the King for us, asking him to withdraw the Swiss Legion." Necker showed a hesitant expression. Okay, I will try my best to convey it, but everyone, the King's determination this time is extraordinary. He seems to have decided to take thundering measures. If I were you, I would not come to the Palace of Versailles for the meeting for the time being, so as not to be thrown into the Bastille. Danton suddenly laughed and said, "Okay. Let the King throw me into the Bastille." Voltaire also spent time in the Bastille. For people like us, spending time in the Bastille is a big medal and an achievement that can be boasted for a lifetime. The other representatives also shouted together, "That's right. That's it. Let him catch us. I have long wanted to go to the Bastille to gild myself." Necker looked at the booing representatives in silence. Okay. So do I need to convey this truthfully as well? Just say that you can't wait to be arrested and thrown into the Bastille? Gentlemen, calm down, the Bastille is not a gentle place. Mirabeau, just tell him that. See if he has the courage to send us who were elected by the people to the Bastille. Necker was about to say something when there was a sudden volley of neat gunfire outside the hall. Then the Parisians outside the hall screamed. The representatives in the hall were stunned. Some representatives who were close to the window leaned on the window and looked out, then exclaimed, "The Swiss Legion opened fire on those who supported us." Dan rushed out of the hall first and yelled at the Swiss Legion outside, "What are you doing? How can you shoot at unarmed people?" The Swiss officer guarding the door said categorically, "We didn't fire at anyone, we just shot intimidatingly, but the accuracy of the smoothbore rifle was poor, so maybe a few unlucky guys were shot." Before the officer finished speaking, screams came from outside. "They killed Henry from the tailor shop. Oh my God, the clothes I'm wearing were made by old Henry. The King is going to massacre us. Fight them." People shouted, and the noise of hand-to-hand combat came from the window of the Royal Conference Hall. It was obvious that the crowd was attacking the Swiss caller. Robespierre jumped onto the windowsill of the conference hall, stood on the windowsill and shouted to the people outside, "Everyone, don't be impulsive. It was just a threatening shot. You quickly send the unlucky guy who was shot to the doctor. Maybe he can still be saved. We are preparing to talk to the King, and the beloved financial director Mr. Necker will express our will on his behalf. Mr. Necker is here, in the conference hall. He will convey our demands to the King." Robespierre's speech was clear and powerful. The commotion outside gradually subsided, and then Robespierre turned his head and looked at Necker. "Sir, please go to His Majesty the King as soon as possible, before it's too late." "I refuse." Louis V put his hands behind his back and said firmly, "I have made the biggest concession. If it were my grandfather's grandfather, they would have all been beheaded. Necker, the representatives are afraid of the Swiss Legion." Louis V was overjoyed. "Are they afraid?" Necker was stunned. "Oh, at least they are worried." Louis V clenched his fists and made a good gesture. "Good, great. They are right to be afraid." Sure enough, Marie's suggestion is right. Necker was confused by Louis V's actions. The representatives asked me to convey. Let you convey it. And you come? You are my financial director. Not theirs. Louis V said, waving his fist. He muttered, "I want to be tough," and then continued, "If you insist on standing on the side of the parliament, then I can only dismiss you." Necker looked depressed. He didn't know why the king, who always behaved like a good guy, was so determined today. He said, "Then you can dismiss me. Anyway, I can't solve your financial crisis." Louis V thought about it and waved his hand. "Okay. You are dismissed, Necker. This is your own request. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 History is a whirlpool that draws those floating duckweeds to the center. The news of Necker's dismissal first reached the National Assembly, which was meeting in the Imperial Conference Hall of the Palace of Versailles. Mirabeau's first words after hearing the news were, "Oh my God, this idiot actually did it. CIS, it will probably take a few days for the official announcement. The biggest problem we have to worry about now is that there is no one who can pass on our message to His Majesty." And Ning thought, it doesn't matter, His Majesty the King will come to talk to us in a few days. Now Louis V probably saw that the National Assembly could not do anything with his Swiss mercenaries, so he was arrogant. In a few days, he will realize his weakness and return to the path of communicating with the Parliament. And Ning did not say these words out loud. He felt that his reputation in the National Assembly was a little too high. This is not conducive to fence-sitting. So this time he did not play the role of a prophet, but acted worried like everyone else. Just at this time, Danton came over and asked him, "What do you think of the current situation?" And Ning answered seriously, "It's very bad, and there is no way to break it. Without Necker, we can't even guarantee that the king will read our letter. Everything is in a dead end." In fact, Ning knew how the situation was finally broken, and it was really difficult to resist spoiling it. If he spoiled it now, he might be praised as a great strategist who could predict the future. But he didn't want to become so famous. It would be difficult to operate if he was too famous. "I am the leader, how can I sit on the fence? You know, I can't sit on the fence, I'm not at this level." Ning's strategy is to get involved in the incident, but only a little bit. Considering that he had inexplicably replaced others' positions twice to show off, he refused to go to the famous scene of the Bastille a few days later. Originally, he wanted to punch in, but with the experience of taking the lead twice before, he had to give up his persistence as a history enthusiast. If he really went to the scene to punch in, he might inexplicably become a hero of the capture of the Bastille. If someone wants to mess with the National Assembly in the future, the first person to be messed with is Andy Frost. This is not okay. The French Revolution was a crazy era. Those who stood out in the early and middle stages were later sent to the guillotine. Only by sitting on the fence can you be safe. In short, Ning has decided that on July 14th, he will stay in the hall of the Imperial Council, and no one can ask him to move. No one can think of it. A few days later, on July 10th, the whole of Paris was restless. Parisians kept making trouble, and the various situations they created in turn aggravated the deterioration of the situation. Coupled with the rumors flying all over the sky, the people of Paris were in a panic during this period. During the whole time, riots broke out all over France because people finally ate the last bread, and news came from time to time that other cities suddenly began to decorate streetlights. These news exacerbated the restlessness of the people in Paris. Finally, July 14th arrived. The day before this day, the police and guard stationed in the city of Paris refused the order to shoot at the crowd. Although just a few months ago, they had put out the Reveron rebellion with thunder. This is probably because the National Assembly has been convened for more than a month, which has changed the cognition of everyone in Paris. The Enlightenment and human rights have penetrated into the hearts of every peddler. The whole of Paris is like an oil pan on a stove. The oil temperature is ridiculously high and crackling in the pan. On the morning of July 14th, Ning decided to set off early to prevent being trapped in the city of Paris by the crowd who wanted to make trouble. As soon as he came out of the room, he saw a large crowd gathered in the Royal Palace Square next to his house. Huh? Wait a minute, it seems that the people who captured the Bastille started from the Royal Palace? Good guy. Ning has traveled through time for too long and has forgotten many historical details. If he remembered this, he would have stayed at Danton or Robespierre's place last night. But it's not too late to run away now. He can sneak into the carriage and start running. Ning made up his mind and started looking for a carriage. Originally, Fanny should have done this, but with a recent situation, Ning felt that it was too dangerous for Fanny to go out alone, so he let Fanny stay at home. Now he has to find a carriage by himself. There are many rental carriages waiting for business near the Royal Palace. Since the Duke of Orleans opened the palace to the public, this place has become the favorite place of the petty bourgeoisie. Many people come here to attend salons and drink coffee. These people will rent rental carriages. But today, the carriages that usually wait for business near the Royal Palace have disappeared. Come to think of it, Paris is so chaotic now, it's too dangerous to go out to solicit business. It's understandable. While Ning was anxiously looking for a rental carriage on the street, the people gathered in the square of the royal palace were whispering to each other, discussing the situation with concern. Ning heard someone complaining, "The king doesn't care about our lives. He is no longer the king of the French. Didn't you listen to the representatives? Sovereignty does not belong to the king, but to us." Ning couldn't help but take a closer look at the person who said this, and found that it was a man wearing trousers, not the bourgeois who usually came to the cafe near the royal palace to talk. The man in trousers said excitedly, "I never thought about it this way before. The king is the king, a noble and superior existence. But now I think, what is the difference between him and us? He is just a locksmith, a craftsman. And he is impotent." And Ning curled his lips. It seems that the tabloids supported by the Duke of Orleans have finally borne fruit in their tireless smearing of the king. Although the Duke of Orleans' original intention was to overthrow the kingship of Louis V and become the king himself, he himself has the right to inherit the French throne, but objectively his propaganda weakened the kingship. At this time, Ning finally saw a rented carriage coming along the road. The coachman of the carriage showed a worried expression when he saw the crowd gathered at the royal palace. He urged the horse to turn around, and seemed to be ready to leave this place of trouble. Ning hurried to the carriage, waving his hands while running. He did not dare to shout loudly, for fear of focusing everyone's attention on himself. Ning did not know whether the coachman saw him or not. Anyway, the coachman turned the carriage around quickly, and it seemed that he would start to make money in the next moment. But at this moment, the coachman tightened the reins. It seemed that the coachman chose the latter between hedging and doing business. The coachman turned his head to look at Ning, and gestured to urge him to hurry up. Ning hurried to run. At this moment, a young man suddenly jumped onto the table of an open-air cafe. "Compatriots!" the young man shouted, "removing Necker is an insult to the nation. It is the precursor of another St. Bartholomew's Night. St. Bartholomew's Night was a bloody night when Catholics killed Protestants during the Reformation. The reputation of France as a filial son of Catholicism began at that time." The young man pulled out a pistol from his waist and pointed it at the sky, "But we will not sit and wait for death like the Protestants. Citizens, put on the green cap badge that symbolizes hope and arm yourself." Ning couldn't help but look back. After all, he was a history enthusiast. When major historical events happened around him, he couldn't help but. His turning back was bad. Because he found that the person speaking now was his acquaintance at the Brittany Club, the journalist Dame Willant. Dame Willant also saw Ning, and he immediately pointed at Ning and said, "Look, everyone. A member of the National Assembly is with us. Oh, no. I'm about to be wiped off. Why? I shouldn't have turned my head back." Dame Willant said loudly, "He is Andy Frost, the hero who shouted to the king that no one could let us leave unless we use a bayonet." Ning stopped running and stood there looking at the sky. It's over. Chapter 70. What is forced to do something? Ning wanted to struggle at first. He turned around and said to the people who were looking at him, "Everyone, be patient. We will continue to ask the king to withdraw troops this morning. We can't give up hope yet. I'm rushing to the Palace of Versailles to participate in the discussion, so let's." Dame Willant came up and grabbed Ning. "What are we still discussing? Are you discussing how the king can use bayonets to expel the representatives? At this time, we should arm ourselves and save the National Assembly. Mr. Frost, please lead us." Ning was about to prevaricate, but the coachman he had just stopped waved his whip and left. "Don't go. I order you to stop in the name of the National Assembly." Ning cried out in despair in his heart. But the carriage drove away. "It's over, Liao third tone, now he is going to be the leader." Ning quickly completed the iteration of his thoughts. He can't run away, so he might as well stand guard in this position. So Ning changed his expression. He pushed Dame Willant in front of him away, and walked straight to the table where he had just stood. Ning climbed onto the table and scanned the entire square. At this time, everyone in the square held their breath, and suddenly there was silence. "Ning, His Majesty the King thinks that he can scare us by gathering the legions. No, he is wrong. United citizens will never be defeated. Arm up, citizens." After Ning finished speaking, someone immediately shouted, "Arm up. Disarm the guards." Ning spread his hands flat to suppress everyone's noise, and continued, "I know there are a lot of weapons in the cellar of the Invalides." You asked Ning how he knew it. Of course he knew it by peeking at the script. Anyway, no one would jump out to ask Ning how he knew it. "Ning, let's go to the Invalides. Arm up." At this time, Someone ran over from outside the square, found a flower bed next to the square and stood on it, shouting, "Citizens! The people in the Saint Antoine district are armed. They captured the church and found a lot of food. The priests are hoarding food and want to starve us to death." Everyone's attention was immediately attracted by the sudden news. What? They are hoarding food. In addition to priests, there are also grain merchants. They all want to starve us to death. And Ning saw that everyone's anger was about to turn to grain merchants and priests, and hurriedly shouted, "Everyone, why do the first and second estates dare to ignore our lives and hoard food?" In fact, the grain merchants were definitely the third estate, but Ning confused this concept and called them the second estate. Ning, so we must completely change the French system. Abolish the privileges of the second and first estates. For this we must support Parliament. Down with privileges. Only by overthrowing privileges can we truly change our situation. Citizens, arm yourself. Go to l'Invalides. As soon as Ning finished speaking, many people shouted together, "Go to l'Invalides. Down with privileges." The crowd surrounded Ning and began to march towards l'Invalides. At this time, Ning encountered a problem. He didn't know how to get to l'Invalides. He had lived in Paris for 5 years and was only familiar with the terrain around the Paris Military Academy. After all, he usually attended classes there, and after class he would stroll around looking for places to eat, and he became familiar with it after a few visits. But l'Invalides was beyond Ning's cognition. In fact, Ning usually took a taxi when moving around in Paris. He didn't understand how to get from the Palais Royal to l'Invalides at all. Now he was just being surrounded by the crowd and couldn't decide where to go by himself. Everyone should know how to get to the Invalides, right? And Ning could only think so. It would be funny if a group of people got lost in the huge city of Paris. At this time, Ning suddenly saw Fanny coming out of the house. Fanny glanced at Ning, pursed her lips slightly, then turned around and started walking quickly. It seemed that Fanny was going to lead the way for Ning. A big help. When they arrived at the Invalides, the guards guarding the Invalides looked very nervous. They seemed a little shaken when they saw the large group of people rushing over. At this time, the officer leading the guards shouted an order, "Everyone raise your guns. Don't panic." The soldiers raised their guns, and a row of black muzzles were facing the dark crowd. And Ning shouted, "Stop." He pushed away the people blocking him and strode to the front of the team. The officer stepped forward and said to Ning, "Are you the leader of this gang? Disband them immediately. Go home." And Ning pushed the officer away and pointed at a guard soldier and asked, "What kind of work does your family do?" The soldier hesitated and replied, "It's a carpenter, sir." "Very good, you are the son of a carpenter, what about you?" He pointed at the soldier next to him. This time the soldier immediately replied, "My family is a tailor." "Tailor, very good. And you?" "Bricklayer, sir." "Great. Look at you, you are the sons of carpenters, tailors and bricklayers, but now you are pointing your guns at carpenters, tailors and bricklayers like you. You are also the third class. Why are you pointing your guns at your compatriots?" "Just because of the order of a second-class noble." Seeing that the situation was not good, the noble officer immediately said, "Don't be bewitched by him. Soldiers should obey orders as their first duty. Now I order you, shoot. Shoot immediately." And Ning stood firm and faced the black muzzle of the guard's guns. Even though he knew the history, he still felt a little weak at this time. His fearlessness was mostly pretended. In fact, he was extremely nervous. The large amount of adrenaline secreted almost made his heart break through the restraint of his chest and rush to freedom. At this time, the carpenter soldier was the first to put down his gun. The officer said angrily, "What are you doing? I ordered you to raise your gun." The carpenter soldier shook his head. "No, I recognize this gentleman. He is Andy Frost, the noble killer, and the hero of us civilians. I can't shoot him." And Ning thought to himself, "You know me too? Why am I so famous? Can I not be so famous?" The other soldiers also put down their guns. The officer was furious and drew his sword. "I order you to raise your guns." "No, I." The carpenter soldier looked at his companions and seemed to have gained courage from them, so he said firmly, "I refuse. I can't shoot at my compatriots." The officer was so angry that he blew his beard. He took a step forward and was about to stab the soldier's shoulder with his sword in his hand, but Ning took a step forward and grabbed the officer's arm holding the sword and disarmed him. The crowd was excited and rushed up with howls, disarming the remaining sergeants. The soldiers who refused to shoot at the crowd were pushed aside, and people poured into the courtyard of the Invalides. And Ning shouted loudly, "Go to the cellar. The weapons are in the cellar. Here." Someone immediately found the way to the cellar. "The door is locked. I'm a locksmith. I'll open the lock." Someone immediately volunteered. A moment later, the door was opened and the crowd poured into the cellar. A large number of weapons were transported out of the cellar and distributed to everyone. "There are still cannons." Someone shouted excitedly, "Come on, help us push the cannons out." At this time, Dame Mulan, who had initially dragged Ning into this vortex, shouted, "Frost is an artillery officer. Let him command the cannons." And Ning wanted to hold her for it. Oh my god, when the Bastille was captured, the one who commanded the cannons was a laundry shop owner named Yulan. Because Yulan didn't know how to use cannons, the cannons didn't play any role when the Bastille was captured. Is it my turn now? In the end, the Bastille was breached because the soldiers guarding the Bastille mutinied and stopped the Marquis de Launay from igniting the gunpowder and perishing together. Before the soldiers mutinied, the Marquis de Launay saw that the situation was hopeless and had decided to surrender, but he proposed a conditional surrender, which was rejected by the people. That's why the Marquis threatened to ignite the gunpowder. In short, the people did not break through the city defenses from beginning to end during the capture of the Bastille. But now, with Ning, a professional artillery officer, commanding the artillery, the situation might be different. After all, the Bastille is not a bastion that can withstand artillery fire, but an old-style castle that is not very resistant to artillery fire. Forget it, I don't want to care about it anymore. I'm tired. Let's destroy it, quickly. And Ning, who accepted his fate, raised his hand. "Okay. I'm an artillery officer, I'll command the artillery." Chapter 71 The beginning of a new era. At this time, Ning and a certain Li Yuanhong, who was forced to do something, had a lot in common. It is said that a person's fate is closely related to the course of history, and now he believes it. Ning is now in this position, without any personal effort, and was pushed up by the course of history. But since he is in this position, he should do his job well. An artillery officer must be more accurate in firing cannons than the laundry owner in real history. But Ning remembered that the cannons in the Invalides seemed to have no ammunition, so everyone wanted to go to the Bastille to get gunpowder and ammunition. At this time, several men in trousers came out pushing ammunition carts. Well, in this time and space, the Invalides has cannonballs, so there is no reason to go to the Bastille, right? At this time, someone with a gun asked loudly, "Where should we go?" Yes, where should we go? Everyone looked at each other. Obviously they had not thought about what to do next. So everyone's eyes fell on Ning again. And Ning was in a dilemma. Originally, in history, this group of people went to the Bastille to find gunpowder for the cannons, because it was rumored that there were a lot of gunpowder and ammunition in the Bastille. Later, the cannon with shells pushed by the laundry owner Yulan was seized from somewhere else, not from the Invalides, by the main force of the people who attacked the Bastille. Now that a whole ammunition truck has been seized, there is no need to worry about gunpowder and ammunition. So the question is, what should I do next? And Ning thought that there was no reason to go to the Bastille, so I couldn't just drive to the Palace of Versailles, right? At this time, a strong man slapped his thigh and said, "What are you hesitating about? Our goal is to rescue the National Assembly in Versailles. Let's go to Versailles. Bombard the Swiss mercenaries and rescue the members of parliament from the imprisonment of the Swiss mercenaries." And Ning was shocked. Was the attack on the Bastille going to become an attack on the Palace of Versailles? Next, should we seamlessly connect to the public trial of the king and take an unimagined path? No, it can't be like this, otherwise history will be off track. Moreover, the 20,000 Swiss mercenaries were no regular troops, and the common people probably couldn't defeat them. If the Swiss mercenaries defeated the common people, it might strengthen Louis XV's confidence and make the locksmith king more determined to suppress the rebellion by force. No, it can't be like this. And Ning stood on the cannon and shouted loudly, "We can't go to Versailles. There are 20,000 Swiss troops in Versailles. It would be a waste of sacrifice to fight them. We should go to the Bastille." The crowd looked at each other. Bastille? Why should we go to the Bastille? What does it have to do with the Bastille? And Ning's brain was spinning rapidly at this time, making up reasons to go to the Bastille. Soon he thought of citizens. The Bastille is a symbol of royal power. Voltaire was also imprisoned in this prison. If His Majesty catches progressives, he will definitely be imprisoned in the Bastille. It is said that the mutinous guards were also imprisoned there. We attacked the Bastille, firstly to rescue them. Secondly, to destroy this symbol of royal power. Through this action, we told the king that we no longer recognize his royal power. After Ning finished speaking, he wanted to slap himself. What was he talking about? It was too far-fetched. But the crowd cheered, as if they only heard the last sentence: we no longer recognize his royal power. People shouted in response to Ning, "Go to the Bastille. The Bastille. I've been annoyed with that fortress for a long time." The crowd began to move again, and many men in trousers worked together to push cannons and ammunition carts. And Ning was lazy and sat directly on the ammunition cart, and no one said anything to him. The large group of people set out from the Invalides, and many armed civilians joined the team along the way. Whenever a new person appeared, without Ning saying anything, everyone would rush to shout, "Everyone, let's go to the Bastille together." Generally speaking, the armed people joined the team in a confused manner. Occasionally, a few would ask, "Why the Bastille? What's there?" Then they would get a variety of answers. The more normal ones would repeat Ning's words, saying that it was a symbol of royal power and that if they broke through it, they could support the gentlemen of the National Assembly. There were also some messy answers. Some said that the Bastille was holding the gentlemen of the National Assembly, some said that the king held the mutinous guards there, and the most outrageous one was that someone answered that the Bastille was holding Voltaire. Voltaire had been dead for many years. Ning was too lazy to correct these statements. Anyway, the situation was already a mess, and no one would care about it afterwards. In short, the current task was to follow the historical script and break through the Bastille on July 14th to ensure that history did not go off track. Finally, the large group of people drove to the door of the Bastille. The crowd began to shout, "Open the door. The symbol of royal power, surrender to the Parisians immediately. Release Mr. Voltaire." And Ning heard this shout, "Damn it, I wouldn't have mentioned Voltaire just now." The commander of the fortress, the Marquis de Launay, showed his head on the wall and shouted, "I am the commander of the fortress, the Marquis de Launay. This prison does not hold the people you said. You are lying." Someone shouted, "Yes, open the door and let us go in and take a look. Release Mr. Voltaire." And Ning frowned and wanted to catch the guy who shouted Voltaire and slap him a few times. He even suspected that this guy was shouting like that on purpose. The Marquis de Launay said angrily, "What bullshit. Nonsense. This is the royal prison. I am guarding here by the order of the king. No one can enter the prison gate without the king's order." And Ning thought to himself, "It's your turn to die here today, why don't you mention the king?" The crowd immediately became excited, and many people turned their heads towards Ning. "Mr. Frost, this is a king's lackey, fire the cannon." "Yes, fire the cannon." And Ning scratched his head. He remembered that in the process of conquering the Bastille in history, no action was taken at the beginning. Marquis de Launay wanted to negotiate at the beginning, so he let the people's representatives into the Bastille to negotiate. Why not follow the script? Is it just because I, a butterfly, flapped my wings? Mr. Frost, fire the cannon. Lead us to flatten this fortress. Yes, fire the cannon. Please lead us. And Ning curled his lips and waved his hand, "Load the cannon." The order was issued, and several trousers immediately climbed onto the ammunition cart and began to clumsily take the prefabricated gunpowder cartridges from the ammunition boxes. Yes, at this time, the French army, after the reform of the artillery director Giberville, had begun to use prefabricated gunpowder cartridges, which was a relatively advanced practice in all of Europe. Seeing that the men in long trousers were clumsy, Ning waved his hand and shouted, "Get out of the way, let me do it." He rolled up his sleeves and personally took up the barrel to clean it. After cleaning the inner chamber of the cannon, he took a piece of pre-made gunpowder, stuffed it into the barrel, pushed it to the innermost part and pressed it tightly, then took another cannonball and pushed it into the barrel, also pressing it tightly with a stick. After the loading was completed, Ning waved his hand and ordered, "Brave men, help me push the cannon up." Immediately, several strong young men stood up. Together, they pushed the cannon towards the gate of the Bastille. Marquis de Launay saw it clearly from the top of the castle wall and asked loudly, "What are you doing? I order you to stop your dangerous actions immediately." And Ning also shouted back at the top of his voice, "If you want us to stop the action, lower the drawbridge and hand over the fortress." Marcus Delaunay was silent for a few seconds, and then shouted again, "You know I can't do this. Stop it, or we will shoot." And Ning no longer responded to the Marcus, but ordered the people pushing the cannon, "Push the cannon quickly." As a traditional fortress, the Bastille has several lines of defense. The outermost defense is the urn that protects the main city gate, and there is a drawbridge outside the urn. Although the trenches around the Bastille have long been filled after so many years of development, the protection provided by this urn and the drawbridge still exists. If you want to attack the main city gate, you have to lower the drawbridge. Historically, this drawbridge was lowered by several young people who climbed over the wall of the urn. Yes, they climbed over the wall of the urn. But now, it seems that Ning's cannon needs to speak. And Ning commanded everyone to push the cannon to a position several dozen meters in front of the drawbridge. "Stop. Release the cannon." After everyone released the wheels of the cannon, and Ning personally stepped forward and operated the cannon to aim. And Ning's system played a role at this time, identifying the cannon as Ning's handheld weapon, giving a crosshair like the one in World of Tanks, and marking the possible landing point of the shell with a dotted circle. And Ning saw that it was not working. The distance was still too far, and it was impossible to guarantee that the drawbridge would be hit with one shot, so he waved his hand again and ordered, "Keep pushing forward. It's not close enough." The guys just now pushed the wheels of the cannon together again. 1, 2, up. The cannon slowly approached the drawbridge. The voice of the Marcus Delaunay came again, "Stop. If you don't stop, I will open fire. We can discuss it." When Ning heard the words of the Marcus, he thought that this Marcus, as in history, was not firmly on the side of the royal power. The Marcus still wanted to talk to the people who surrounded the fortress. "But the problem is, I have pushed the cannon to this position, but I don't want to fire it. Does this make sense? Look at the people around, their faces are full of anticipation for the sound of the cannon." After the cannon moved forward 10 meters, and Ning called for a stop again, and then personally aimed the cannon. After aiming, he inserted the fuse into the hole above the cannon, making sure that the fuse penetrated the charge. "Torch!" Andy Frost shouted. Someone immediately put a torch in his hand. And Ning, history will remember this moment. This cannon shot ushered in a new era of freedom. After that, and Ning lit the fuse. Chapter 72, The Taking of the Bastille. The cannon roared, and the white smoke from the muzzle immediately obscured Ning's vision. He could not see the effect of the bombardment at all. Firearms of this era all had this problem. Once fired, the front was all white and you couldn't see anything. You had to wait for the wind to blow away the smoke before you could see anything. But the cheers of the people around him couldn't be fake. The crowd cheered and rushed forward. It was obvious that Ning's shot had just blasted something. And Ning grabbed Demerlan, who was about to rush forward. "Wait a minute. Are you crazy? The design of the city wall is to allow the defenders to massacre the enemy troops that broke into the first gate." Demerlan looked at Ning in confusion. "Then what should we do? Are we completely helpless?" Before Ning could answer, volleys of gunfire and screams were heard from the direction of the city gate. "And Ning, look! Demerlan, don't look at me. You led everyone to attack the Bastille. Now you want to tell us that it is impossible to rush into the fortress with infantry alone." And Ning wanted to tell the reporter that in real history, no one rushed in until the end. In the end, it was the Marcus Delaunay who was shaken first and planned to use gunpowder to negotiate with the attackers. In the end, the soldiers who were unwilling to continue killing and injuring the people mutinied and took the torch from the Marcus. Unfortunately, and Ning couldn't say that. He could only pat the cannon beside him. "What are you talking about? Don't we have this? Come on, go to the nearby houses and get 3 thick quilts and a few buckets of water." The Bastille fortress originally required that enough space be left nearby to ensure the firing range of the fortress, but the fortress had been built for hundreds of years, and the city of Paris was developing rapidly, and the surrounding area was already full of houses. After Ning's order was issued, the trousers immediately ran to the houses to find quilts. And Ning loaded the cannon again. That's right, because he was the only one who was an artilleryman at the scene, so he had to do all the loading work. Soon, the trousers requisitioned quilts from nearby houses. And Ning covered the cannon with a quilt, ordered water to be poured on it, and then asked his men to hide under the wet quilt and push the cannon forward. This trick was learned by Ning from later war movies. This is called Earth Tank in the movie, and it appeared in Little Soldier Zanga. And Ning, for France, go forward. His temporary men immediately shouted, "Push hard, get up." The earth tank was pushed forward like this, and Ning followed beside him, crouching down and hiding behind the wet quilt. When passing through the broken suspension bridge, 2 spoons of boiling oil were poured from the top of the city wall, and all of them fell on the quilt. And Ning shouted, "Push. Don't let them throw torches down to light the oil." The guys pushing the cannon roared together and pushed the cannon into the doorway behind the broken suspension bridge. The armed crowd followed the sports car, and at this time, they all raised their guns and fired, beating back the guards on the top of the city wall. The sports car was pushed into the inner courtyard of the city wall. Looking around, there were many corpses lying in the inner courtyard. A woman with a broken hand was rummaging among the corpses, muttering, "My hand, where's my hand?" Desmoulin followed Ning into the inner courtyard. When he saw the scene, he immediately gasped, "Oh my God! Fortunately, you held me." And Ning pressed Desmoulin behind the quilt. Just at this time, a volley of gunfire came, making a chee-chee sound on the quilt. After the volley of gunfire, Ning lifted the quilt to reveal the muzzle. He personally aimed the gun and aimed at the inner door that was just a few feet away. Someone on the city wall exclaimed, "They are going to shell the inner door. This broken door can't withstand the bombardment at all." And Ning picked up a torch and lit the fuse of the gun. At this distance, the shell will definitely hit the gate directly. The sound of the cannon shook the ancient fortress, and the pungent white smoke once again obscured the entire field of vision. In addition to the sound of the cannon, Ning could vaguely hear the sound of the shells smashing wood. It hit. Just at this time, the wind that passed through the gate of the city wall blew away the white smoke of the bombardment, so Ning clearly saw that a large piece of the main door of the Bastille was blown off, revealing a broken bolt. "The bolt is broken. Now the door can be pushed open directly." And Ning shouted, "The gate has been blown to pieces. Charge!" The crowd cheered and rushed into the gate of the city wall. And Ning thought that his mission was completed and he could retreat to the second line to watch the show. He was about to make way, when suddenly a trousers man pointed at Ning and shouted, "Wait a minute. Brothers." It was Mr. Froster who broke through the gate. He should be the first to step into the Bastille. "What? No, I don't need this honor." And Ning was about to refuse, and another trousers man shouted, "We carry him in." "What are you doing next?" And Ning couldn't help shouting, "No, don't carry me." However, no one paid any attention to him. The trousers men carried Ning and rushed to the broken castle gate. And Ning shouted, "Put me down. Be careful. Once you enter the castle, the first courtyard is also designed to kill attackers." However, in the excited state, no one listened to Ning. He was carried into the Bastille fortress by the crowd. As soon as he entered, everyone saw the guards lined up on the low wall facing the gate. And Ning was right. The first courtyard inside the castle was a trap designed for attackers. Marquis de Launay shouted, "Fire!" The 2 rows of guards on the low wall fired in unison, and the white gunpowder smoke directly blocked the faces of each of them. The lead bullets tore apart the trousers men who rushed into the city. As they fell to the ground, and Ning was also thrown to the ground. And Ning, damn it! I told you not to carry me. He stood up and found that the guards were loading on the low wall in front of him. Looking around again, there was no place to hide. This courtyard was designed like this, ensuring that the attackers who rushed in would be slaughtered by the firepower of the defenders. And Ning wanted to retreat, but found that there were attackers pouring in from behind. Damn, isn't it just forward? We can't wait for the defenders to finish reloading. And Ning drew his officer's sword, screamed, and rushed to the defenders. He directly blocked the bayonet of the first defender and kicked at the unprotected lower body. Taking advantage of the gap when the opponent's posture collapsed, he stepped forward and killed the opponent with a sword. After killing the first enemy, he shouted loudly, "Soldiers! Open your eyes and look. Who are you shooting at? These people are ordinary fathers, sons and husbands just like you. We don't need to fight each other." However, Ning shouted too late. The angry crowd had already rushed forward and knocked down the defenders one by one with pitchforks and other tools. Ning jumped over the defenders' line and rushed to the Marquis de Launay. The Marquis was holding a torch, and behind him was a mountain of gunpowder. "Don't come over. Stop. Otherwise we will die together." Ning slashed at the Marquis' hand holding the torch with a sword. The Marquis screamed, and the torch fell out of his hand. Ning was shocked and hurriedly reached out to grab the torch. When he grabbed the torch, He felt his heart was about to jump out of his throat. Oh my God. Why did I cut him with such a sword? And Ning was sweating as he thought about it. But since he successfully grabbed the torch, he must strike a handsome pose. And Ning held the torch high, and the sword in his hand pointed directly at the Marcus' throat. Surrender, Marcus. However, the Marcus did not get a chance to surrender. The angry man in trousers rushed forward and stabbed the Marcus' body with a pitchfork and a bayonet. A strong man stabbed and said angrily, I told you to resist. I told you to kill my friend. The unbearable Marcus shouted, enough. Let me die. Then another strong man rushed up, raised the wood-cutting axe in his hand, and chopped off the Marquis's head with one axe before Ning could react. People cheered. At this time, someone shouted, the prisoners in the prison have been rescued. And Ning turned his head and saw several people in prison uniforms being dragged out of the main tower of the castle with confused faces. The crowd made a noise. Ask who they are. Who is Mr. Voltaire? Don't mention Voltaire. And Ning decided to interrupt everyone's investigation into the identities of these prisoners. He raised his voice and drowned out all the noise. Gentlemen, you are free. The crowd immediately shouted, freedom. Long live. Chapter 73. No, Your Majesty. This is a revolution. At this time, and Ning was not the only one who did not go to the Palace of Versailles to perform his representative duties. At this time, Bailey, the representative of the Third Estate, and Marquis de Lafayette, the representative of the Second Estate, were both at the Paris City Hall. Bailey had just led the civil servants of Paris to force the original nobles of Paris to give up their power. Now they were discussing the establishment of the Paris government to lead Paris. Yes, the Paris ruling body established after the citizens seized power during the French Revolution was also called the Paris government, the same name as the great organization nearly 100 years later. In order to maintain public order, Bailey looked at Lafayette and said, we must select citizens of good reputation to form a national guard. I think only Marquis Lafayette is qualified for the position of commander-in-chief of the guard. Lafayette nodded, in the current situation, I should contribute to the constitutional cause. Several gentlemen around Bailey made sounds of admiration, and one of them breathed a sigh of relief. That's great. When the National Guard is formed, we will have the capital to negotiate with His Majesty. Bailey nodded, yes, then we can use more radical methods to force His Majesty to make concessions. Suddenly, someone shouted, everyone. The Bastille has been breached. All the gentlemen present fell silent, as if they could not accept this information for a while. Bailey looked at the person who came to report the news and asked in confusion, what place was breached? Can you say it again? Bastille. Bastille was breached by armed civilians. Marquis de Launay was beheaded and paraded through the streets by the civilians. Lafayette frowned and said, how is it possible? Although the design of the Bastille is outdated and it did not adopt Dupont's defense theory at all, it is a fortress after all. How could the unarmed civilians break in? The civilians obtained weapons from the Invalides, and then captured the Bastille under the leadership of Andy Frost, the son of a cobbler. Lafayette was surprised. How did he do it? To capture the Bastille, if it were a regular army, it might take a whole day. How did he manage to break through the fortress in such a short time? Did he find more than 20 cannons? The person who brought the message hesitated for a moment and replied, it seems, there is only one. Lafayette, as the only soldier present, took a breath of cold air. One cannon? The fortress was conquered with just one cannon. I don't know the details. After the Bastille was captured, the people were parading in celebration. Maybe you can go find someone who knows the situation better and ask him. At this time, Bailey said, this is a good thing. Mr. Lafayette, the Bastille is the strongest fortress in the whole of Paris, and it is where the royal family imprisoned the Enlightenment figures. Its breach is equivalent to a shout. We should seize this opportunity to force His Majesty to make concessions. Lafayette's face was solemn. We can't be blindly optimistic. His Majesty still has 20,000 Swiss mercenaries. What if he decides to take tough measures? I think we should organize a National Guard immediately. It just so happens that the Bastille has been breached, and those who support new ideas in the city should have taken action. It will be very convenient to recruit them to form a National Guard. Bailey, how about using the red and blue colors of the Paris emblem for the uniforms of the National Guard? Lafayette shook his head. No, red and blue only represent Paris. I should add white, which represents the royal family, to make it 3 colors. This way, the king can have a way out and not be pushed too hard. Bai nodded. Let's do it. At the same time, the news that the Bastille had been captured spread throughout Paris. At this time, Marat was writing furiously in his study, writing an article to be published in the Friends of the People tomorrow. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Come in. Marat responded, and the pen in his hand was still writing quickly. Desmoulins opened the door and rushed in, shouting to Marat excitedly, "Why are you still in the room? I'm writing tomorrow's editorial, it's very important. The Bastille has been captured." Marat stopped writing, looked up at Desmoulins in confusion. Which Bastille? It's the Bastille where Voltaire was imprisoned. Just now it was breached by citizens led by Mr. Andy Frost. Do you know what this means? Marat stared with his eyes wide open, his mouth slightly open. This. Suddenly, he was half a beat slower and became ecstatic. This means that the symbol of royal power has collapsed. Are you sure it was the armed citizens who breached the Bastille? Of course I'm sure. There was only one soldier, Mr. Andy Frost, at the scene. The rest were armed citizens. Mr. Frost personally loaded the cannon and directed everyone to push the cannon close and fire. Only 2 shots broke the 2 city gates. Then Mr. Frost drew his sword, shouted "Citizens, follow me," and rushed into the fortress first. I was there and saw it all with my own eyes. Mr. Frost alone chopped down several guards defending the city, and kept advancing to the defender, Marquis de Launay, and then shouted, "In the name of all the citizens of Paris, I order you to lay down your arms." Marat was ecstatic. "In the name of all the citizens." And then the Marquis de Launay surrendered. Yes, he surrendered. Frost stepped forward and cut off the fortress flag next to the Marquis with one knife. Marat stood up excitedly and paced back and forth. It's wonderful. Why wasn't I there in person? I should have been there in person. I should have witnessed this moment. Desmoulins, I was there. I witnessed everything for you. And you can use your pen to let all the people in Paris witness it all. Jean. Desmoulins called Marat's name. Jean. Take up your pen and spread this glorious moment. The gentlemen of Versailles need this support at this time. Let the king know that the citizens of Paris are not afraid of his bayonet. Marat stopped pacing and sat down at the table. You are right, I should write about this. I really want to write it. The same thing happened in every corner of Paris. In the big and small taverns in Paris, people who witnessed the capture of the Bastille became narrators. For example, in a dirty tavern in the Saint Antoine district not far from the Bastille, people surrounded a drunken old man in the middle. Let me tell you, we also rescued Mr. Voltaire. The old man said seriously after a sip of wine. Someone immediately raised an objection. Mr. Voltaire died a long time ago and was buried in the Pantheon. The old man spread his hands. Well, I don't know, anyway, we rescued a Mr. Voltaire, maybe his son. I heard it with my own ears from Mr. Frost. Mr. Voltaire was imprisoned in the Bastille. We pushed the cannon in to save him. The old man took another sip of wine, took a long sip, and then continued, I tell you, Mr. Frost seemed to be possessed by my lord. He kicked open the door of the Bastille with just a light kick. And then he kicked open the second door with another light kick. Someone loudly retorted, no. He clearly blasted it open with a cannon. The old man rolled his eyes. Huh? You don't understand. Can a fortress easily push a cannon in? A cannon has a gun carriage and such a wide axle. How can it be pushed in through the small door of the fortress? It was Mr. Frost who kicked it. It's just that the sound was very loud. Think about it, that kick kicked the door open. How could the sound not be loud? So everyone thought it was the sound of a cannon. Everyone nodded in agreement. It seems to make some sense. At 8 o'clock that evening, the news finally reached the Palace of Versailles, and a report was placed in front of Louis V. Louis V picked up the report with doubt and began to read it. He had just written nothing happened today in his diary. After reading the report, Louis V looked up and looked at his court steward, the Duke of Liancourt. Is this a rebellion? The Duke shook his head. No, Your Majesty, this is a revolution. Chapter 74, The Night of the First Year of Freedom. At midnight, Ning was escorted by the insurgents to the Paris City Hall. Along with him came the body of the Marquis de Launay, the commander of the Bastille garrison. Lafayette frowned when he saw the body. I was playing bridge with the Marquis de Launay last week. Ning said hurriedly, I tried to stop the lynching of the crowd, but it was too late. Maybe this is his fate. Marquis Lafayette sighed. The anger of the people just disappeared like this. which should be considered a good thing. It seems that Lafayette doesn't care much about his friend, the Marquis de Launay. The father of the United States changed the subject. I heard that you personally commanded the siege? How did you manage to break through the fortress in such a short time? And Ning smiled and said, there is no secret. I just pushed the cannon to a place less than 50 fathoms away from the city gate and fired. I first fired at the drawbridge, then pushed the cannon into the city wall and fired a shot at the inner gate. As soon as Ning finished speaking, the gossipers added fuel to the fire and said, Mr. Frost also personally rushed into the inner courtyard of the fortress and personally defeated the defenders who wanted to stop the attackers in the inner courtyard. Did I rush in personally? I was carried in by these damn ghosts. Then they were knocked down by a volley of guns, and I fell on my butt and had to charge into the battle in person. I was so unlucky. Lafayette listened to the description of the guy who volunteered, and looked at Ning with an expression of disbelief. You also rushed into the inner courtyard of the castle yourself? It's amazing. After doing so many dangerous actions, you didn't even have a wound on your body. Could it be that you are the one who is attached to the battlefield? Wait, what is the one who is attached to the battlefield? That's pretty cool. No, don't give me any more inexplicable titles. At this time, Bailey stepped forward and said to Ning, capturing the Bastille is a great achievement. Unfortunately, in this situation, we can't give Mr. Frost any more awards. Do you think you are willing to serve as the deputy commander of the newly formed National Guard? The presence of the hero who captured the Bastille will greatly boost the morale of the National Guard. And Ning curled his lips. When Bailey said the word deputy commander, and Ning noticed that the corner of Lafayette's mouth twitched. It seems that Marquis Lafayette does not want a civilian artillery officer to be his deputy. And Ning, who made such a judgment, immediately said, well, I'm just a lieutenant, not suitable for such an important position as deputy commander. I think I can be the artillery instructor of the National Guard, responsible for training the National Guard in artillery. Lafayette's expression was visibly relieved. The Marquis's mind is really simple and easy to understand. Lafayette, since Mr. Frost has volunteered, I think so. Mr. Frost was able to break through the Bastille so quickly. Obviously his use of artillery has reached perfection, and he is more than qualified to be an artillery instructor. I think all the artillery of the National Guard can be handed over to Mr. Frost to lead. At this time, many traditional generals would regard cannons as a kind of extra, and believe that the outcome of land battles still depended on the intensive shooting and charge of line infantry. In history, the French Revolutionary Army did not begin to attach great importance to the use of artillery until the Napoleonic era. Now the Napoleonic era has not yet arrived, and it is obvious that Lafayette still regards artillery as a force that has been icing on the cake, rather than as a decisive force in the battle. So Lafayette easily handed over the entire artillery unit of the National Guard to be formed in the future to Ning for command. And Ning was suddenly hit by the position that fell from the sky, and he was a little confused for a while. What does it mean that he, a national representative, suddenly has the power of the army? At this time, Bailly said, in addition, Mr. Frost, we are going to go to the Palace of Versailles to meet the Emperor tomorrow and ask him to withdraw the Royal Swiss mercenaries. My goodness, this is not an audience with the Emperor at this time, it's clearly to force the Emperor to abdicate. Marquis Lafayette, as a hero who captured the Bastille, Mr. Frost should naturally go with us. And Ning thought, forget it, I just destroyed the castle that symbolizes royal power, and now you want me to go to see the king? What? You want me to tell the king how I broke through his fortress? Although he complained in his heart, and Ning responded, I understand, let's go together tomorrow. As soon as the voice fell, Tolestal, Duke of Orleans, entered the city hall with 2 followers. Freedom! The Duke of Orleans shouted, the people in the street are singing and dancing, and they all call today the first year of freedom. Andy, you did a good job. You did a great job. But there is one thing I don't understand. How did you kick open the door of the Bastille with your foot? And Ning couldn't help but frown. In fact, just by smelling the alcohol, she could guess that the Duke of Orleans was already drunk. And the irrelevant content of the words further showed that the Duke of Orleans was in an extremely unconscious state at this moment. Duke of Orleans, how did you break through the fortress? Tell us so that everyone can see it. And Ning didn't think she could make things clear to the Duke at this time, so she changed the subject and said, Mr. Duke, you came to the city hall just to talk about this? You should have something more important, right? As soon as Ning finished speaking, she heard Bailly beside her muttering, What important things are there? He is obviously drunk and is looking for a place to chat with people. Lafayette shook his head. Drinking does mess things up. So I usually only drink a little at a banquet, and quietly pour out the rest. At this time, the drunken Duke of Orleans suddenly began to shout "Long life Paris!" Late at night that day, Ning fell asleep in the guest room provided by the city hall. The next morning, when Ning opened his eyes, he saw an unfamiliar servant bringing in a military uniform. "Ning, what is this?" "Mr. Lafayette thought that I should wear a military officer's formal uniform today, so he sent someone to your house to get it." Ning raised his eyebrows and asked, "Did my maid give it to me?" "It seems so. I'm not the one responsible for getting clothes, so I don't know the details." Ning curled his lips, stood up from the bed, and began to change into military uniform. As soon as he put on his military uniform, Lafayette came running over and knocked gently on the open door. "Ning, good morning." "Good morning, Tiger of the People." Ning couldn't help but frown. "Who gave me this nickname again?" "Your friend Marat, in his newspaper Friends of the People. He has praised you to the skies, as if you conquered the Bastille single-handedly." "Ning, of course there is no such thing, it's a rumor. I just did a little bit within my ability." Lafayette raised his eyebrows. Ning quickly changed the subject. "By the way, what's going on in the palace?" "Lafayette, His Majesty looked dejected yesterday. Today he convened a meeting of all the senior officers in Paris, including Marshal Broglie. I don't know what measures His Majesty will take to deal with it." Ning remembered that Marshal Broglie was a new noble who was inclined towards the Great Revolution. In fact, at that time, all the prominent nobles in Paris were basically inclined towards constitutionalism and reform. Since His Majesty had also summoned Marshal Broglie, the possibility of armed suppression would be greatly reduced. Ning breathed a sigh of relief. He was worried in his dreams last night whether his interference in history would change history. The French Emperor was unreasonably stubborn and chose to suppress by force. Ning looked in the mirror and adjusted his military uniform. Lafayette took Ning's hat from the coat rack and handed it to him. Ning then discovered that the red, white and blue round emblem had been glued to the military cap. This must have been prepared by Fanny at home. Ning seemed to see Fanny making this round emblem with a candle in the middle of the night last night. Ning took the hat and put it on his head. "Lafayette, are you ready? Then let's go to Versailles to meet the Emperor." Chapter 75, Your Majesty is Dejected. As soon as they arrived at the Palace of Versailles, the palace steward told Lafayette and Ning that His Majesty the King was waiting for them in the side hall on the first floor. As soon as he entered the side hall, Ning suddenly felt that the officer's dog tag he was wearing was a little hot, because there were a lot of generals present, and everyone was wearing the general's mark, and his dog tag as a lieutenant suddenly seemed as humble as an ant. Marshal Broglie said, Could it be the son of the cobbler who personally captured the Bastille?" Ning nodded. "Yes, it's me." "I heard that you kicked open the door of the fortress," asked the marshal. Ning thought to himself, "Who the hell spread this news? I want to know who is talking nonsense, and I will make you pay." Ning, "No, I used cannons to bombard the fortress from close range and broke the gate." Another general said, "You even led the team to rush into the inner courtyard of the fortress? You are very brave. The National Guard has a warrior like you, and it can definitely fight 10 people with one. I guess they made you the deputy commander of the National Guard." Ning heard that the general was being sarcastic. They probably thought that the National Guard was a bunch of street urchins and looked down on them. Lafayette said, "No, the National Guard hired him as an artillery officer. He is a mathematics teacher at the Paris Military Academy and should be very suitable for this position." At this time, Louis V coughed and focused everyone's attention on himself. Louis V was wearing a white dress with a blue cloak that was so big that it affected his walking. The cloak was covered with white irises. Queen Marie stood beside him, also dressed in a gorgeous dress, and wearing an afro wig on her head. Ning couldn't help but take a few more glances at the Queen's wig. To be honest, his impression of this head shape mostly came from black women. He didn't expect that in this era, it would be popular among French ladies to wear wigs of this shape. Louis V cleared his throat, then looked at Lafayette and said, "Well, the security in Paris has been very bad recently." Lafayette interrupted Louis V, "The National Guard will take responsibility for maintaining public order throughout Paris. We will work closely with the elected officials of Paris." Louis V curled his lips. Okay, you are cooperating very well. Well, about the Bastille. Lafayette said in a loud voice. The people captured the Bastille to express their support for the Parliament. If you agree to withdraw the Swiss mercenaries stationed in Versailles and ensure the personal safety of members of the National Assembly, I think the people should not take further action. Louis V looked very frustrated. He glanced at Queen Marie beside him, then sighed. Okay. I will let the Swiss corps withdraw to its original station. Is that all? After the words fell, Marshal Broglie nodded and praised. Your Majesty's decision is very wise. And Ning observed Louis V carefully. He looked like a rooster with its feathers plucked, trying his best to maintain his last dignity. The queen next to the king lowered her eyes, not hiding her hostility at all, and stared at Ning viciously. And Ning thought to herself, Queen, don't hate me, I was just coerced, it was not me who came up with this. Louis V sighed again, and then said, now, I'm going to meet the representatives of the National Assembly who are meeting in Versailles. I hope you two will come with me. Lafayette nodded. Of course we will go. We were also representatives of the National Assembly. Louis V was slightly shocked. You too. Then he saw Ning, so he curled his lips. Oh yes, of course you are. You are the one who said that representatives cannot be forced to leave unless bayonets are used. And Ning thought to herself, you just remembered it. Louis V complained, I haven't used the bayonet against you yet, and you took up the bayonet to protest against me. And Ning wanted to say that I didn't mean it, I was coerced, but then she thought that no one would believe her, so she gave up. Queen Marie glared at Ning fiercely throughout the whole process, as if she wanted to eat Ning alive. Next, Louis V went to the Imperial Conference Hall where the National Assembly was located, announced to the representatives the news of the withdrawal of the Swiss army, and then ordered the representatives to come up with effective measures as soon as possible to restore the law and order in Paris. After saying this, Louis V left as if he was running away. As soon as the king left, thunderous applause broke out in the room. Danton stood up first, looked at Ning, and clapped his hands. Mirabeau shouted, well done, Mr. Frost. Your armed coercion saved the entire Parliament. And Ning could only smile. At this point, she could no longer say that she was just coerced to participate in the capture of the Bastille. Ning was quickly surrounded by the parliamentarians. Everyone wanted to shake hands with him, and everyone praised Ning's decisiveness and bravery when shaking hands with him. By the time the handshakes were almost over, Ning had become the savior of the National Assembly. Lafayette, the new commander-in-chief of the National Guard, was left aside by the parliamentarians. Except for a few representatives of the Second Estate who were already familiar with him, no one came forward to greet him. After Ning shook hands with everyone with great difficulty, he said to everyone, I only did a little insignificant thing. It was Mr. Lafayette's National Guard that really forced the king to make concessions. It was because of the existence of the National Guard that the king gave up using the Swiss court to dissolve the Parliament. Everyone then turned their eyes to Lafayette. Lafayette smiled and said, without Mr. Frost's decisive capture of the Bastille, His Majesty would not have been so shocked, and he probably would not have withdrawn his troops so simply. In short, Mr. Frost made great contributions. And Ning frowned, always feeling that Lafayette's words were not from the heart. Damn, could it be that I have offended Lafayette by being too prominent this time? In fact, in the history of the revolution that Ning knew, after the capture of the Bastille, Lafayette was the person who benefited the most. Not only did he become the commander-in-chief of the Paris National Guard, he also became a favorite of the king. A few days later, when the king went to the Paris City Hall, it was Lafayette who personally put the tricolor emblem symbolizing the revolution on the king. Damn, if I interfere like this, could it be that most of the benefits that Lafayette originally wanted be taken away by me? Maybe Lafayette will hold a grudge against me. And Ning glanced at Lafayette again, but the commander-in-chief of the National Guard changed the subject. Everyone. The threat of the Swiss mercenaries to the Parliament has been lifted. Next, we have to solve the problem of public security in Paris. I think we should pass a bill to appease the citizens as soon as possible. Mirabeau immediately said, we should pass a bill that recognizes the sovereignty of the people and the principles of freedom, equality and fraternity. This will appease the people. And Ning thought, what the hell, the real way to appease the masses is to give them bread. Now the people of Paris are taking to the streets to make trouble, mainly to grab bread, okay? But he didn't say anything. He has been in the spotlight enough today. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, Every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.